Good morning and welcome. Today is Monday, December 14th, and this is a continuation of City Council's public budget hearings. This morning, we are having our citizen participation hearing on the tax and budget. Each registered speaker will be given a chance to speak. You will be given 3 minutes. After you hear your name, please give your name and neighborhood for the record. Our first registered speaker is Christina Howe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Christina Howe from Bloomfield. I'm Executive Director of the Bloomfield Development Corporation, and that is who I'm representing here today. Our organizational values, after listening to our community and discussing as a board and staff, led us to formally endorse the GOT 12 demands recently. From those demands and our values, we have started doing organizing work around the city budget and looking at how it relates to the values that are espoused by city departments and elected officials. So the first point is from Stop the Zone, point 4, Bloomfield Development asks that the city schedule city council meetings accessible to more working people. These meetings are not accessible to those who are in critical positions and not unemployed, or unlike myself, don't have a regular 9-to-5 job. We advocate for equitable, accessible, and robust community engagement citywide, as we have with the Port Authority in the bus stop consolidation process. We would ask that public meetings such as the budget should have multiple meetings at multiple different times on different days to maximize exposure, and that there would be opportunity for community engagement after the mayor releases the proposed budget, instead of this fairly rushed last minute feedback to council in the last week before you vote. That would allow registered community organizations the time to help residents understand the budget and to gather feedback from them if they can attend. The second point I'd like to make is that in this time of tight budgets, it's still necessary to prioritize funding according to values. 82% of Bloomfield voted to support the recent ballot referendum expanding the powers of the Citizen Police Review Board. And funding can be moved in favor of funding programs that address the needs of communities better, as well as supporting our police better. The Keystone Research Center points out that 20% of the operating budget of Pittsburgh is to the police force, not including the policing lines in each of the other departments. It is a very large amount. Bloomfield experiences overdoses, homelessness, and other issues that would be better served by people with long training in these issues, and which would likely lead to less frustration by police when they are trying to deal with situations for which they have not been intensely trained. Residents throughout the city need crisis intervention services for a variety of critical needs, including mental health, that need responders who have been immersed in and trained to work with these residents. And then finally, safe and affordable housing. I hear the term naturally occurring affordable housing thrown around a lot in relation to Bloomfield, but that's a misnomer. In Bloomfield, almost all apartments and houses that are naturally occurring affordable housing are actually deeply unsafe, often without smoke detectors, with flaking lead paint.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dave Brennigan.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Dave Brennigan. I live in Lower Lawrenceville, and I'm the Executive Director of Lawrenceville United. I'm here to support calls to defund the police in order to invest in critical community needs. The needs brought on by COVID-19 are a 5-alarm fire for our communities. As we head into the new year, our city is staring down an eviction tsunami that will accelerate the already well-documented existing affordable housing crisis. And as recent research shows, this could quite literally be a matter of life or death for many of our most vulnerable residents who will bear this wave. Food insecurity is at unprecedented levels. My own organization has scaled our food programs tenfold since March. Lost incomes and employment are likely to be continued challenges as the economy takes time to rebound. Small businesses, the lifeblood of neighborhood districts like Lawrenceville, are permanently closing in record numbers. And because of the public health crisis of racism, all of this is hitting our Black and brown neighbors hardest. With declining revenues to the city, we must appropriately respond to these multiple crises, and that means reprioritizing where we spend our public dollars to address them. According to the PA Budget and Policy Center, Pittsburgh is among the most heavily policed medium-sized cities in the nation, while our rates of violent crime are relatively average. Even as we have some of the lowest rates of homicide in 20 years, and even as this year has seen the largest movement in our nation's history highlight the dire costs of over-policing, the Police Bureau's share of the proposed operating budget is the largest in the last 6 years. Meanwhile, the PA Budget and Policy Center's analysis of the city budget shows proposed spending on affordable housing below 2019 levels. Lawrenceville United was founded in 2001 as a public safety organization. For 20 years, we've worked closely with the Pittsburgh Police to improve public safety in the neighborhood. We've learned a lot in that time, but perhaps nothing as strongly as the lesson that public safety depends on so much more than policing. Crime rates have plummeted in our community, yet the lack of affordable housing has meant that many of our residents, especially Black and brown neighbors, have been displaced to areas with much higher crime rates. Even as we have worked to root out violence caused by drug distribution networks, dozens of our neighbors have died from overdoses in the past decade. Crime can make residents fearful of leaving their house, but so can unsafe intersections where pedestrians are repeatedly hit by vehicles. After-school programs, summer camps, and park maintenance and programming have all been highly effective strategies for us to reduce violence and crime. These strategies and the critical responses to the pandemic needed right now depend on city departments that are already stretched thin and show higher cuts than the Police Bureau in the proposed budget. In this moment, we should be doing everything in our power to bolster the efforts of these departments and to invest in affordable housing and workforce development that will be our community's key to resilience. I urge City Council to reprioritize funding from the police department to bolster these most urgent critical needs and long-term strategies to lift up all our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Barbara Warwick.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. So my name is Barb Warwick. I live in the 4 Mile Run neighborhood of Greenfield. I'm here today to thank Councilman O'Connor for introducing an amendment to begin defunding the Mon Oakland Mobility Project by pulling the $4.1 million allocated to it in 2021 and reallocating that money to housing opportunity funds, small business support, and safer streets in Hazelwood. The Mon Oakland Mobility Project is nothing but a wasteful $20 million vanity project for the mayor that will run a shuttle road through Shenley Park, 4 Mile Run, and Hazelwood to allow privately operated shuttles to run between the universities in Oakland and the yet to be completed Hazelwood Green development. These shuttles will just accommodate 9 riders each and move a max of 900 riders per day to one destination. We've been fighting this shuttle road for many years, 5 years at least, and written countless letters, filed right to know requests, spoken at public meetings, staged marches, testified to council, published articles, and so on. We also published the Our Money, Our Solutions alternative community-led plan, which has 1,200 individuals and 23 community organizations signed on. This plan would expand bus service, public bus service into Hazelwood. We've already one bus service on the 93, giving residents their direct access to the parks, Will Hill, Oakland, Bloomfield, and Lawrenceville, and connecting them to grocery stores, critical employment, healthcare destinations, et cetera, none of which the Mon Oakland connector will do. The next step is to extend bus route 75 over the Hot Metal Bridge to further expand bus access to Hazelwood. So anyway, I'm just here to, say thank you to Councilman O'Connor and strongly encourage the other council members to vote on this amendment. It is the right thing to do. And I also want to say to all the people testifying here today for a just and equitable budget, I'm here to say that, we can do this, right? This is a fight that we can win together. Our voices are more powerful than the police unions, than developers, than the universities, and then all the other high-paying campaign donors. For the rest of council, it's time for you to take the same bold action that Councilman O'Connor has taken on the Mon Oakland Mobility. Vote yes on the amendment to defund the Mon Oakland project. And please put forth new amendments to stop the station, reallocate police funding to support Black and brown lives, and fund real world community investment that helps the residents of Pittsburgh today. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dawn Plummer.
Good morning. My name is Dawn Plummer. I live in Point Breeze and serve as the Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. We serve and convene over 100 member organizations across the city and beyond who work towards a just, equitable, and sustainable food system. I'm here this morning to underscore the critical importance of our city's budget as a moral document that directly should reflect our priorities. And now more than ever, the city spending should be laser focused on critical needs of our residents, including housing, jobs, and food. As upheld in a recent city report, Feed Pittsburgh, food is a basic right of all residents. However, at least 1 in 5 Pittsburghers are food insecure, with this number growing significantly as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're concerned at the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council that the proposed budget cuts will negatively impact critical staffing and the overall efficiency of key city food systems infrastructure, departments, and services that we depend on. These city functions include the following: meal programs for children and seniors provided via city parks, farmers markets that serve as fresh food access points for residents and critical revenue streams for farmers, supports for community gardens and farms, including the city's vacant lot access initiative, Adopt a Lot, city planning department's efforts to support neighborhood food planning, as well as sustainability efforts such as food waste prevention, recovery, and composting, the Learn and Earn program, which employs young Pittsburghers to plant and steward urban farms and community gardens, creating jobs, fresh produce, and vibrant community spaces. City supports for Pittsburgh's restaurants and food businesses, many of whom are facing very critically difficult times and need the ongoing support of PLI and other city initiatives and departments. The Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, who has a responsibility to transport people and goods throughout the city, has an operating principle that every household in Pittsburgh should access fresh fruits and vegetables within 20 minutes of travel to home. But it's questionable where the resources are allocated to advance that mission. The city also supports critical CDBG grants that have supported organizations like the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank and others to distribute emergency food. In this crisis, we have an opportunity to rethink our priorities and guarantee that our city budget line items truly reflect our values and urgent community needs. We can choose community investment in affordable housing, the creation of good jobs, social services, and critical food systems infrastructure that keep our city fed instead of over-policing and criminalization. We urge City Council to review both the recently released Feed Pittsburgh report as well as the Greater Pittsburgh Food Action Plan and allocate city resources towards these goals and strategies. We're also urging our elected officials at the federal level to provide much needed support to cities and states. Thank you so much for your time and attention to these urgent matters.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Antondo Dandiway.
Yes, hello, my name is Antondo. I live in Bloomfield and I'm an analyst for the Pittsburgh Budget and Policy Center. And I'd like to speak about the city budget regarding housing and equity. As the city grapples with budget cuts and uncertainty moving into 2021, it's important to evaluate how funding decisions affect all residents and the impact budget decisions have on the most vulnerable populations of those out of work, working in essential services, and in communities that have seen historical disinvestment. In the housing space, state and federal eviction moratoriums were enacted as a response to the COVID-19 recession. It gave renters temporary relief. But based on historical data, there's a pent-up demand of over 2,600 Pittsburgh households that are at risk of being evicted. This is on top of the Affordable Housing Task Force identifying a deficit of over 14,000 affordable units for households earning less than 30% of the area median income. Additionally, the percentage of renting households that are cost bearing or paying over 30% of their income to housing remains close to 50% in the most recently available pre-pandemic data. Measures to address affordable housing still fall short, as a housing choice voucher distributed by the Housing Authority continue to have a waiting list of over 9,000 households. The marginal 5% increase in affordable housing from 2020 to the 2021 proposed budget will not be sufficient to solve these problems. The City of Pittsburgh has adopted recommendations of the Affordable Housing Task Force with the formation of the Housing Opportunity Fund, and this year has established a legal fund for residents facing eviction. But in its current form, the URA cannot address all the needs of all Pittsburghers. This is evidenced in its rental assistance fund already being expended for the year and the homeowner assistance program currently not accepting new applications. The city must anticipate the coming eviction crisis and put more funding into affordable housing. This can be accomplished by doubling the funding for the Housing Opportunity Fund, which will be a $10 million increase, which already targets low income and cost burning communities. It can also adopt citywide inclusionary zoning as per the recommendation by the Inclusionary Housing and Incentive Zoning Exploratory Committee. And it can prepare for the potential wave of evictions in early 2021 through judicial or legislative action in the form of an eviction moratorium or financial support to renters. These are measures that require funding that can be acquired through other changes in the budget by reevaluating the possibility of police spending or making UPMC pay its fair share. And lastly, there needs to be increased transparency in the creation and the format of the budget. There's difficulty in tracking affordable housing spending and outcomes, which can be remedied by another Affordable Housing Task Force recommendation of a database. And reconciling past spending and proposed spending in the capital budget is also difficult. The city should think about what this budget says about a city and who does it support moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Leah Stevens.
Hi, my name is Leah Stevens, and I am a healthcare worker, flute teacher, and resident of East Liberty. I am here to again express my concerns about the projected 2021 Pittsburgh operating budget as you start voting on it today. You already know our demands: to put an immediate stop to the relocation of the Zone 5 police station, to defund the police by at least 50% and invest the money in housing and social services, which in accordance with PA State Law 1951, Act 265, Section 9, is not illegal, as several of you claimed last meeting, and to tax UPMC, remove their observed tax exempt status to solve the economic crises presented by the pandemic. You already know that the real root of crime is lack of resources to housing, to healthcare, to food, to essential services. You know that when 10% of the police force was quarantined, there was no effect on crime rates. Equipping them with military gear is shown to have no effect on crime either. Last week, you heard from 40 angry and upset constituents, from people who spent the summer protesting and were not listened to, from canvassers who have been speaking to their neighbors, from working people of Pittsburgh, from a mental health worker who warned you the dangers of defunding the Office of Equity in the middle of a pandemic, from a domestic violence survivor who was saved by access to affordable housing and knew that if she called the police, there was a 40% chance that the officer who answered the call would also be a domestic abuser. So what will it take for you to do? Not what is radical, but what is humane. You call healthcare workers like myself heroes, but then defund the very essential services of our field. You say Black Lives Matter, but continue to militarize and weaponize the police and fail to meet the material needs of Black communities in Pittsburgh. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but we know the Democratic Party reigns supreme in paying friendly lip service to social movements without any substantive change, still backed and bankrolled by private investors and corporations. Minneapolis recently defunded their police department by $22 million to fund pandemic-related services. This, of course, is the bare minimum, but if they can do that, so can we. If in Seattle, there could be a historic grassroots tax Amazon victory to bring in $240 million yearly to fund affordable housing, we can do the same with UPMC. Let's be clear, we would absolutely have these demands, pandemic or not, and we expect them to be met, pandemic or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Connor Mulvaney.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone, I'll start my video. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy as cases surge again. My name is Connor Mulvaney. I'm a community mobility advocate and I live in Brookline. Today, I'm here to ask Council to further amend Mayor Peduto's proposed 2021 budget. The cuts to DOMI, Public Works, EMS, and especially the Office of Equity are unconscionable. Pittsburghers, myself included, took to the streets almost every day this past summer in spite of the danger to our health to tell you all, our elected officials, that we want changes made to how our tax dollars are spent. We want our money to be invested back into our communities in healthy and constructive ways. Our rights to speech and assembly were routinely met with unnecessary force, and often indifference from the mayor and many members of council. So we ask you again to please create a budget that supports our communities. We do not want or need a bloated and militarized police force. We want affordable housing. We want safe and efficient transportation. We need as much help as we can get while we working people continue to bear the brunt of the worsening COVID-19 pandemic. Please do the right thing. I thank you, and please continue to stay safe.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Daniel Sun.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. So my name is Daniel Sun. I live in Bloomfield at zip code 15224. And living in Pittsburgh just makes me really sad. It's so sad to live here. The air, some of the worst. There's lead in the water. 7,000 Black residents have moved out of Pittsburgh from 2014 to 2018. At last week's city council meeting, a survivor testified about the funding cuts to EMS. And then Councilperson Burgess, who looks like Dr. Eggman from Sonic the Hedgehog, implies that domestic violence is not a real crime. And when you have people who say things like that, and then the rest of council say nothing to defend survivors, it is no wonder how Pittsburgh is the worst city for Black women. And despite that, the mayor's and council's responses are a whole lot of nothing. Like maybe you got a little 20K here to the Office of Community Health and Services, maybe a little Black Pittsburgh Matters legislation. But in the end, y'all need to do better. We are testifying for like 1,000 minutes straight, telling you all how you can do better, but then you dismiss us because we're not Black enough. And I'm sorry, but y'all made this city white. Like you gentrified the city, so that's not our fault. And for the record, some of our Black leaders spent this weekend fighting off Proud Boys in DC. Meanwhile, Dr. Egghead flew to court in his Eggmobile after another failed attempt to catch hedgehogs to explain how even though he is violating the Pittsburgh Constitution, it is somehow should not be enforced. My demand for you all is to listen to our concerns and take them seriously and our demands and to figure out how to make them work. We are all Pittsburghers through and through, each with personal invested interest in the outcome of this budget. So you all need to listen to us and figure out how to act on what we want. You have options. Strasburger has a bunch of police reforms. Just pick some you like. Gross has identified every policing related line item and just remove some stuff that doesn't make sense. The police do not need new vehicles in a pandemic because people should be inside more anyways. So you could vote to extend the 2020 budget for a few months, and then we could debate this some more. I don't think that's against the Home Rule Charter. You can go and check. It might be, I don't remember. So, or you could just do the thing Stop the Station is asking. So you have so many options available to you, and you really just need to get to it. Because this budget right now, if it keeps going, is just gonna remain terrible for the rest of us. And it's gonna continue making Pittsburgh the worst city for Black women. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mel Packer.
Good morning. I come to you today as a longtime city resident, taxpayer, and homeowner. As I thought about the proposed city budget, my taxes, the plight of so many low-wage workers, the racism that makes us one of the most segregated cities in the U.S., my sometimes despair and oftentimes anger over the declining economic status of those essential workers who keep our city functioning, I was tempted to channel Dickens' Ghost of Christmas Past. That apparition is both stern and sympathetic, disturbed that the past cannot be changed, but hoping that Scrooge, and presumably we, can change. But instead, I'm the ghost of Christmas present, filled with unrealized possibilities, knowing that workers must be listened to, respected, and prioritized in a world that instead prioritizes the trivialities of the rich, their wealth, and their needs. But as the ghost of Christmas present, I'm also the bearer of bad tidings. As a wife of Willie Loman cried in Death of a Salesman, attention must be paid. For like it or not, we are never going back to quote unquote normal. We are not in the next few years, or perhaps not for a decade or more, going to see all those shiny new buildings we subsidize, whether retail or luxury apartments, fully occupied. This pandemic has exposed the system in a way that few thought possible a few months ago. The city budget is not going back to normal in 2021, 22, 23, etc. The economic system we live under is failing, has failed, will continue to fail. To believe otherwise is to willingly deceive ourselves. We must create and believe in a new normal. But now, as the hopeful goes to Christmas present, which was a hopeful apparition, I tell you that we can make good soup from these spare bones. This budget, which does not serve the people well, must be changed. We're facing an unprecedented housing crisis that will leave thousands homeless. We do little except give small boosts to an already too small housing opportunity fund and call it victory. We have a bloated police budget more appropriate for a city twice our size with crime twice our rate. Astoundingly, we have a police overtime budget larger than the budget for affordable housing, while the need for mental health services, food, and shelter leaves me almost incoherent at the immorality in that contradiction. There are solutions. It takes boldness and commitment to live by values that places the lives of our residents before the interests of profit makers. We should go after UPMC, make it pay its fair share by any means necessary. We should slash the police budget and swing savings to affordable housing and social services. We should follow Councilman O'Connor's lead, refuse to give Domi Peduto's proposed additional $4 million to run a road through a park, to run in Hazelwood just to serve CMU, UPMC, and the foundations. We should take lessons from Barcelona, Spain, that demanded and seized empty apartments to be rented at affordable rates to workers. We should use COVID money to buy Port Authority passes for low-wage workers to boost mass transit and lessen the financial burden on those essential workers. But finally, we should greet the ghost of Christmas yet to come, not with the fear often generated by that apparition, but with a sense of joy that we can, for it is within our power, create a city that serves not some of the people some of the time, but all of the people all of the time. Our new normal must become a people's normal. And by the way, my email is lighting up with people who cannot get into the session. I don't know what has happened, but many people are saying they're unable to get in who registered. Thank you very much. And I hope you have a good holiday and a safe one. Mask up.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Holly Keane.
My name is Holly Keane. I am an East Liberty resident of 9 years. I am one of the many people here mobilized by Stop the Station, a multiracial and multi-generational coalition of people who will not accept the city using $3 million during a pandemic to relocate the Zone 5 police station. To put that number into context, we can compare it to the budget for the mayor's proposed Office of Community Health and Safety, which she says will address needs that are beyond the scope of law enforcement. That office's budget is $20,000. So speaking in rough terms, the money the city will put into one police station this year could fund 150 offices of community health and safety. That would be a start. So when Bill Peduto says that Black Lives Matter in Pittsburgh and that his budget is reinvesting in Pittsburgh's communities, he's lying. The budget, just like its author, is dishonest. Here's another example. On November 29th, Bill Peduto stated in a tweet that, quote, residents of East Liberty and citizen leaders of the Zone 5 Public Safety Council have asked for the return of their station, their Zone 5 headquarters for years. Plenty of people here today and last week have and will speak to the hundreds of conversations we've had with East Liberty residents refuting the mayor's statement. As for the Zone 5 Public Safety Council, I asked them at the recommendation of the mayor's office, and I was told by their president, quote, with the budget the way it is right now, the city does not have the money to relocate the station. She said, quote, the council has discussed the move in just one meeting and no one present was in support. Whoever in the city told you that we wanted the station moved was a liar. Before I give any further examples, I have something extremely important to say to each member of council and the clerks. That's your cue to pay attention. I think Ricky and President Cale Smith, because your cameras aren't on. I have in my possession a petition with more than the required number of signatures from city residents imploring you to schedule an accessible budget hearing. I was advised by the clerk's office on November 30th that this was, quote, a guaranteed way for citizens to request the hearing. There are so many people who want to be here today but can't because it's 10 a.m. on a Monday. I've emailed this information to the city clerks and I am awaiting their further instruction. But I'm saying it here and now so that in this culture of dishonesty, no one can allege that this petition was misdelivered. I look forward to the clerk's prompt response and the prompt scheduling of a public hearing on the budget at a time that is reasonable for all those who wish to attend and prior to a final vote. I yield my time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christopher Juring.
Hello, good morning. I live in Highland Park, and I've lived in Pittsburgh for about 15 years. Like many people, I gave a statement at last week's meeting and listened as around 40 other community members gave impassioned testimony and made very clear demands. After the comment period, I really just couldn't help but laugh as the members of this council rattled off hollow sentiments and recycled Bill Peduto talking points about not being able to defund the police because it's illegal. We know this isn't true, and this council knows it's not true either. I want to share a section of the text of Act 265 of PA state law. Section 9 states that if for reasons of economy or lack of funds, it becomes necessary for any city of the second class to reduce any employees of its Bureau of Police, then the city shall follow the following procedure. First, if there are any employees in its Bureau of Police eligible for retirement under the terms of any police pension fund, then such reduction shall be made by retirement or pension of the oldest in age and service. And it goes on to describe the methods of reducing police staffing if no officers are eligible for retirement. The refusal of this council to cut the police budget to fund the things our communities actually need is not due to that being illegal or impossible, but rather due to a lack of political will to actually make it happen and a complete failure to stand up to the police and the FOP. Pittsburgh Police Chief Scott Schubert has said that 286 officers will soon be up for retirement. So it's clear that there are legal and logical routes of reducing police funding. What it really comes down to is the absence of a backbone in our city councilors and their financial and other interests in maintaining the police as they are. No Cop Money Pennsylvania, a great organization, has found that council members Cale Smith, Kraus, Coghill, and Lavelle have all taken campaign contributions from police unions. While some of the members of this council have voiced interest in true transformative change and the reallocation of police funding, what will they actually do to follow through with this? And what budget amendments will they introduce? Furthermore, I think we can also reject the ridiculous claims made by council members last week. Council members Coghill and Burgess said that the Pittsburgh Police are one of the finest departments in the country. This department that they're talking about is the one with 22 still employed officers with 5 or more sustained complaints. It's the one that employs Sergeant George Kristoff, who posted racist and disgusting content on social media. This department is the one that murdered Dion Hill in 2003. It's the one that shot and maimed Leon Ford in 2012 with no consequences. And this department is also the one that has abused and injured countless protesters over the summer with no repercussions. So save yourselves the embarrassment of claiming that we have a great police department. To close, I want everyone to remember this. Council members Cale Smith, Coghill, Lavelle, and Strasburger are up for re-election next year. Remember that, and remember what they do or more likely don't do to stop this budget's dangerous cuts, to defund the police, and to actually fund our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ed Nusser.
Hi, I'm Ed Nusser. I'm the Executive Director of City of Bridges Community Land Trust. We're located at 143rd Street in Central Lawrenceville. We're a nonprofit community land trust that serves the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. We build community ownership that preserves permanent affordability, empowers individuals, and ensures responsible growth and stewardship. And we're here today, like so many others, to encourage City Council to reimagine our public safety budget. I've been sitting with a quote that keeps coming back to me over the course of this year. It's almost 70 years old, from President Eisenhower. He said, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and aren't fed, from those who are cold and aren't clothed." And it's a powerful statement, but we have to localize it. We have to acknowledge the reality that every SWAT vehicle, every new police station, every tear gas canister is an after-school program or an affordable home. Building off that idea, last year, Pittsburgh's Economic Justice Circle put it pretty succinctly. They said budgets are moral documents. Budgets are the clearest statement of what our real priorities are. So what does it say when our Housing Opportunity Fund, our direct investment in housing and caring for our neighbors, is less than 10% of our police budget? Where are our priorities? In this moment, where eviction moratoriums are set to expire, where home prices continue to skyrocket with no end in sight, where stable housing is directly tied to survival, we must be directing our resources to put out the fires we are facing right now and to build a system that's more fireproof in the future. We must increase our investment in the things that keep people in their homes and invest in the creation of more homes. 2020 has further exposed the systemic inequalities and racism that are pervasive in our city and our country. Now is not the time to continue with business as usual. Now is the moment to rethink everything. We can do this. We can build an equitable city. We can center the voices and desires of the people and communities who have been and still are systemically disinvested in. But it starts with financial resources. It starts with an investment that is focused on a future built on hopes and aspirations and not fears. The scale of the solution must match the scale of the problem. And after this year, we have no ability to say that we don't know the scale of the problem. We know the scale of the problem. It's up to all of us to rise to meet it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bailey Brown.
My name is Bailey Brown. I'm a resident of Wilkinsburg, past and future resident of Pittsburgh. These meetings must be held at accessible times, regardless of ability to submit written comment. I'm also asking why commenters were booted from the meeting after speaking last week and ask that it not be done today. I do not support relocation of the Zone 5 police station to East Liberty, nor any other police-related projects or purchases. Pittsburgh Police must be immediately defunded by 50%, with a substantial amount relocated to projects that tangibly increase quality of daily life for working class residents, especially Black and brown ones. Affordable housing for renters and owner occupants must be a top priority. The city should also pay into Port Authority, amongst many other things. I'm asking, as so many others have, what about the extremely important jobs in the departments receiving cuts? I haven't yet heard these concerns addressed in a meaningful way, and I hope you will today go beyond acknowledging them and fully demur from the mayor's recommendations. I am an abolitionist. I believe that police and prisons ultimately exist to serve the interests of the ruling class and to uphold a false sense of scarcity and competition. I believe the vast majority of people are victims of this corrupt system and the trauma it produces rather than being inherently evil. We are all only humans on a dying planet who require only food, healthcare, safe shelter, clean water, air, and importantly, love. You are human, right? Corporations are not going to save us from the ravages of climate change, and it is well past time to stop currying their favor. I implore you to take a wide view, to break rank, and to take action that may seem to you radical in your position of power. You may lose career prospects or clout, but you will have gained the respect of millions, including future generations. You will also gain an immense sense of empowerment for sticking up for human dignity. If you do not have an interest in running a more socialized city or feel you are not qualified for the job, then I suggest you step down, because in the aftermath of this horrific year, there are many eager to take your place. You may scoff at us as idealists, but we have done it your way all our lives, and inequity still ravages us because it's baked in. The City Council of Minneapolis, who publicly pledged to dismantle their police department, has failed to uphold this promise. I beg you to show them up and let this be a way that Pittsburgh leads. These demands for justice will come to pass regardless once mass labor strikes begin in the next few years. The only question is, which side of history will you be on? Are you in the pocket of the corporations and police unions, or are you going to keep people safe in our pocket called Pittsburgh? Gee, City Council, we're down on our knees, because no one wants a city with these racist police. Gee, City Council, now what can be done? Gee, City Council, defund.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathleen Schroeder.
Hi, yes, my name is Caitlin Schroering, and I'm a resident and homeowner in 15207. A budget is a reflection of a city's priorities. It is also a reflection of a city's morals, and the currently proposed budget is a bad one. I'm here today to say two things. First, this budget should reflect a 50% cut to the police budget, and that should be redirected to affordable housing, workforce development, and other public health initiatives. Additionally, the budget should double the current allocation to the Housing Opportunity Fund. A recent study showed that Pittsburgh lost 1 out of every 10 jobs between February and August of this year. We need a budget that prioritizes life and livelihood instead of spending millions to militarize law enforcement and take resources away from communities. People need jobs, housing, healthcare, not jail, not militarized police. As I said, a budget is a reflection of the morals and priorities of a city. Are we going to be a place that works to make real long-term systemic changes that address our city's glaring racial and economic realities or not? A critical first step in doing this is redirecting money from the police budget in the form of a 50% cut to it. The second point I wish to make is that there must be transparency, accountability, community input, and racial equity in this budget process. I work in academia, and I have the privilege to work from home and have some flexibility in my schedule during this pandemic. This is a reality not afforded to most. And so I want to call attention specifically to the fact that holding one community input hearing at 10 a.m. on a workday that started over 15 minutes late is not an acceptable avenue for transparency and community input. I know for a fact that there are people who would have liked to attend and could not because of work, and people who registered to speak but had a limited amount of time to step away from work. And because you started late, they're not going to be able to. It also seems that you only let a few people in at a time to wait with no explanation that that's how it was going to work ahead of time, meaning that the rest of us were waiting. I waited like 20 minutes. I know other people are still waiting, and we didn't know what was going on. And the streaming channel on YouTube wasn't in fact loading until about 30 minutes in. It's not okay. And if you had started on time, at least 5 more people could have spoken. I understand that this virtual reality creates challenges, but it is December. We should have figured it out by now. So in sum, this process is not okay. It is not democratic. It is not transparent. And it shows that at the moment, the community is not in fact being prioritized. We elected all of you. You work for us. And this is shameful, but you have the opportunity to do the right thing and to be visionaries and leaders. And the community and citizens are paying attention, and we will hold our elected leaders accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Taylor Hober.
Hi, my name's Taylor Hober, and I'm a teacher in Pittsburgh Public Schools. I work in downtown Pittsburgh. And I'm appalled by the proposed cuts to emergency services in the midst of a global pandemic. Pittsburgh communities do not need more policing. They need access to affordable housing, crisis intervention and mental health services, and well-paying jobs. We've seen time and time again what money for the police bureau has wrought. Though Mayor Peduto has invested in police reforms in the past, we've seen that reforms simply do not work. Just today, an article from Public Source found that 2/3 of city police have misconduct allegations against them, 600 of the 900 city cops. This is unconscionable. I demand that funding for the Pittsburgh Police Department be cut by at least 50%, and that those funds be reallocated to crucial services for Pittsburgh communities, especially housing, since so many people are and will continue to face eviction. If the policing budget was returned to what it was in 2016, $10 million could be redirected to affordable housing. We need to protect our most vulnerable populations from police brutality, from eviction, and from this pandemic. We have an opportunity to design a city budget that helps working class families, and I implore you to vote your conscience. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Kennedy.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Raffadan Kennedy, and I serve as the Executive Director of Pittsburgh United. We're often before council advocating for the most basic things that people in our city need for a dignified life: safe, affordable homes, safe, affordable public water, good jobs, clean air, control over investments in our neighborhoods, and a voice in what happens to us in our daily lives, including when we are forced to take to the streets to protest for what we need. With growing public outcry about documented examples of police violence against Black Pittsburghers, alongside a pandemic and the resulting need to re-examine local budgets amidst shrinking revenues, Mayor Peduto has proposed no decrease in the number of uniformed police officers in Pittsburgh. People and organizations in this community are calling for something different, for a reallocation of funds from policing to affordable housing, workforce development, and preserving public sector jobs, and measures that bring true public health and safety to our communities. We call for amendments today to this budget that begin to immediately reallocate 50% of the budget from policing toward affordable housing. Specifically, all proceeds from the real estate transfer tax should be allocated to the Housing Opportunity Fund. The Housing Opportunity Fund should have an additional allocation of at least $10 million, doubling the funds available to at least $20 million, as our city faces an ever-expanding affordable housing shortage and deepening eviction crisis. In turn, those dollars need to be made available for direct housing assistance immediately. We must also preserve civilian public sector jobs in city departments, especially those that provide critical resident services related to food, housing, and other basic needs. Pittsburgh's budget is the moral document of the city. It should be a direct reflection of our priorities. The budget before you is a reflection of the mayor's priorities, not those of his and your constituents. Our priorities are for Pittsburgh's budget to address our city's racial and economic disparities. We need more money for families in the middle of a public health and economic crisis, not more money for police. Some on council have said that what we are asking for is illegal, but that excuse only serves to provide cover for not taking bold action and leadership in this moment of crisis. We can and should reimagine public safety and invest in building our communities rather than over-policing them. We want our voices to be heard and reflected in this budget and in an ongoing community-driven process of budgeting throughout the year that is focused on greater transparency, accountability, and racial equity. We must start today by reducing the police budget and funding our community's most pressing needs. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Diana Polson.
Hi, yeah, I'm Diana Polson. I'm a resident of Point Breeze, and I'm also a senior policy analyst at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Thanks for listening to all of us today. I was a co-author on a report released last week analyzing the mayor's budget with a particular focus on police, housing, and workforce budgets. I'd like to share some of our findings as it relates to the police. We looked at data from the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Database. Data from 2018 shows that the city of Pittsburgh ranks high in the top 12% in the number of police officers per 10,000 residents compared to other similarly sized cities in the 200,000 to 500,000 population range. Pittsburgh ranks 9th out of 77 cities. However, crime rates don't seem to explain this high policing, with Pittsburgh's ranking in the middle of the pack for violent crime in medium-sized cities. If Pittsburgh ranked in the middle of the pack for number of police officers, Pittsburgh would have about 19 police officers per 10,000 residents, rather than the 31 officers per 10,000 residents that it currently has. In Mayor Peduto's budget, $1 out of every $5 of the city's money, primarily taxpayer funds, spent in the operating budget goes to fund the city's police bureau. Even though the Bureau of Police would be cut by 2.9% under Mayor Peduto's plan, the Bureau of Police's share of the whole operating budget is increasing this year to its highest level in the last 6 years, largely because of the cuts to other departments. If the Police Bureau budget remained at its 2016 level, that is 18% of the total operating budget, it would be funded at a decrease of $10 million. These funds would double the amount of money available for our affordable housing trust fund. We know City Council has taken steps forward in police reform, but more can be done, especially when it comes to the budget. Our city's budget really is our moral document. It shows what we value. In the 1960s, there were ongoing debates about how best to address poverty and racial segregation in cities across the US. Should we expand the social safety net or deepen mechanisms of social control? The second approach largely won out since 1980, as you can see through greater investments in police and growing incarceration rates. Today, given the countless number of police killings of Black Americans and public calls for change, it is time to re-examine what has come to be our established practice of solving problems through militarization, incarceration, and force. Another way is possible. We should follow the lead of other cities like Austin, Seattle, New York, Baltimore, Hartford, Norman, Oklahoma, Los Angeles, Salt Lake City, who have begun to cut their police budgets. We know that greater investment in communities on the front end will lead to less need for intervention from police on the back end. Our current crisis gives us an opportunity to rethink our priorities, and I urge City Council to redirect funds from the Police Bureau to other community priorities, like affordable housing, especially given.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dennis McManus. Is Dennis McManus with us?
No, he's not, in 18 and 19 are not here.
Thank you. Our next speaker then would be Dana Lee.
Hi, yes.
Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dana and I live in Morningside. This budget stinks. It just stinks. And I stand in solidarity with all of the people speaking today who are calling for action from this council to reallocate police funding towards other essential social services. There are so many excellent, persuasive points being made here today, and I hope that the members of council listen to all of them and take them to heart. These are not fringe voices. These are the voices of your constituents, and they're really reflective of the attitudes of the people of this city. I don't know why it's so controversial to consider quote unquote defunding the police when this budget is set to actually defund essential city services like the EMS, fire, and public works. The mayor has left this council to absorb the political shrapnel that this budget creates. If I were you, I would be pretty upset about that. And for the members of this council, it's time for you to make a choice. You can either be the public face of bad decision-making, or you can choose to do what your constituents are asking you to do and redistribute funds away from the police to other departments so that we can actually improve the quality of life for all Pittsburgh residents and work on reforming the way we conduct policing in the city. And also, let's get to work on taxing UPMC. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Robin Young. Is Robin Young with us? I do not see the name. Our next speaker is Karian Young. Karian Young. Okay, our next speaker is Mary Lou Linhart.
Hi, thank you for the time to speak. Taking away money from public resources like emergency medical services during a pandemic is appalling and absurd. Where a city puts its money reflects what it values, and the budget currently proposed clearly shows that public health is not what leadership values. This budget shows that our city leadership wants to harm its citizens. I want to see us cut funding from the police budget by 50%, since it has increased by 50% in the last 10 years with no greater effect on crime statistics. Instead of cutting from desperately needed social programs like affordable housing, healthcare, food, and essential services. Furthermore, we should be taxing big corporations more heavily so we have money to increase those social programs. I know the argument or the fear is that businesses will leave and then people will be out of jobs, but other cities like Seattle have proven that this doesn't have to be the case. We need for big businesses to pay their fair share and contribute to the community, otherwise they're only a drain. It shouldn't be on the backs of individual workers to drive the economy. You all keep coming up with excuses, but none of them will fly. If you don't listen to the citizens of the city you claim to represent, you are simply wrong and you're not doing your job. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emma Korb.
Hi, my name is Emma Korb. I've lived
I've lived in Pittsburgh my whole life. I just wanted to start out by saying that you guys really need to move these meetings to a time that's more accessible, that's not 10 a.m. on a weekday. I was here last week and every single person that spoke requested that you guys move these meetings to a time that's more accessible for high school students and for working people. And you guys didn't even do that for this week. So I'm just kind of confused on what you and the police presence in the city of Pittsburgh, especially to build a new police station in Zone 5. This budget is abhorrent and it clearly reflects the city of Pittsburgh's indifference towards the people who live in it, especially working class black and brown communities. It's clear that Pittsburgh does not respect these communities. With the coronavirus going on, more and more people continue to lose their jobs, their homes, their healthcare, their loved ones, and even their lives. Tens and thousands of people are scrambling for security. The world is becoming less and less safe for these people as they're expected to exhaust themselves in order to gain access to basic human needs. Justice, send them who relies on them, their income. You strip them of their health care, for we all know what a medical atrocity that the Allegheny County Jail is. You take the person away from their loved ones, which is a traumatic experience both for the person in jail and their friends and family. People come out of jail worse mentally and physically and less prepared for the future, which creates weaker communities. And it's disgusting to me that in the wake of all these atrocities, the pandemic is prioritizing and expanding police funding when so many people in our communities are barely getting their needs met. Expanding the police budget is like sticking a finger into an already open wound. We are ripping people down instead of building them up, and that is not an environment that is suitable for progress at all. I would like to see our communities in Pittsburgh strengthened by investing in affordable housing, well-funded education, and social services. I would like to see the money I would like to see the police budget cut in half and all of the money from that be invested in the services. I would like to see the Zone 5 police station suspended, and I would also like to see the community to have full control through a democratically elected citizens review board.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kelsey Cardia.
Hello, my name is Kelsey Cardia and I'm a 17-year-old in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm missing school right now just so I can attend this meeting. Clearly, you've made it as difficult as possible for people to attend. As someone who will be turning 18 next year, I will be able to hold the council accountable in next year's election if the budget passes in its current form. It is absolutely appalling that you are looking to increase police funding and cut funding from affordable housing projects and other social services. I demand that 50% of the funds from the Pittsburgh Police Bureau budget be reallocated to these services while taxing big businesses like UPMC to address the ongoing crisis in the middle of this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gabriella Karahia.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriella Karahia, and I live in zip code 15216, and I've lived in Pittsburgh for 8 years. I am severely disturbed by the budget proposal that has been anything but bold or brave in the face of this pandemic. The proposed budget allocates $1 of every $5 to fund the police bureau, the highest level in 6 years, and I find this absolutely unacceptable given that cuts had to be made to the Office of Equity and the Office of City Planning, among others, to accommodate for this. The Pittsburgh Budget and Policy Center ranked Pittsburgh as the 9th most heavily policed of 77 medium-sized cities in the US, and yet we claim to be the most livable. It is not the time to prioritize police funding over the needs of our communities, especially during a pandemic that has left so many struggling to fulfill basic needs such as food and housing. I ask that you please follow in the footsteps of other cities in significantly reallocating funds away from the police to the desperately needed social services and affordable housing in the midst of this crisis. It is absolute hypocrisy to criticize the federal government for their inaction at this time and turn around and do virtually nothing about the problems in our city with the power and funds that we do have at our disposal. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Cricket Brown.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I stand in solidarity with everything everyone has said thus far. Thank you for being here today. I live in Summerhill neighborhood of Pittsburgh, zip code 15214, and I do not agree with Mayor Peduto's budget proposal. If our country's ongoing racial pandemic has taught us anything, it is that the police do not keep us safe. We keep us safe, the people. And so today I'm asking the question, what if these funds went to the people? What if this money went to our health and safety and not our incarceration? And as a white woman, I would be remiss to not explicate the extreme difference my experience in this city is to that of a Black woman. Pittsburgh was voted the second worst city in the country to live here as a Black woman. And so to say we cannot defund the police, we will not defund the police, is sending a very specific message to that community. And I encourage you to investigate that. Some statistics that I think are really important to hear today is that under Mayor Peduto's administration, he has increased the police budget by 42%. 42%. So when we are asking for a 50% defunding of that budget, we're not asking for something extreme. We're asking to go back to something before he steps into office because it is not reflecting what the people want. Also, although 13% of our county's population is Black, 67.3% of our current jail population is made up of Black individuals. So we can see that the system is inherently corrupt, it is inherently racist, and there's other ways to take care of people beyond the police. So yes, I believe the budget needs to be decreased by 50%. We need to halt all police-related infrastructure projects and purchases, including the relocation of Zone 5's police station. I believe we need to tax UPMC, and we need to address the ongoing budget crisis and fully fund well-paid union jobs, housing, healthcare, and public education. And please move this meeting to an accessible time. There's many people that wanted to speak today that couldn't make it because they are working during a pandemic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eva Conrad.
Hello, my name is Eva Conrad. I use she, they pronouns, and I live in Marshall Shadeland. Bobby Wilson, you are my city council representative for this district. I want to say hello because I have not been able to contact you. So I want to comment on the late start to this meeting. I was let into this meeting 30 minutes late. This is really just unacceptable. You all's job is to hear out your constituents, and as it's been mentioned before, this meeting is already at an inaccessible time. And so to think about the folks that are working during a pandemic and taking their only break to make comment in this meeting and then being held up 30 minutes by you all. And this is your job. We did elect you to these positions in order to hear our needs and our concerns. And that is your job, just a reminder. And I want to comment on a few of the things that were spoken on during the city council meeting last Monday. Some council members spoke on the inability for them to pass some of the asks that many constituents have expressed concerns over, such as defunding the police by 50%, commenting on how this is not in their power. But I do want to comment on how it is your power to vote against this budget that is being proposed. And it is in your power to express to Mayor Peduto and whoever is in the power to decide on budget concerns. Then it is in your power to express the needs and the desires of the constituents. That is your job, just a reminder. Ricky Burgess, I have a few comments to make towards you based on the expressions that you had at the last Monday's city council meeting. Speaking on you being pro-business and pro-worker, I'm a little bit curious as to what that means and how you plan to support businesses and workers, because as we see, many of the corporations that this city council has paraded and given much credit to, such as Giant Eagle. Teresa Smith commented on Giant Eagle's help last week, and I want to know what you're going to do for workers, because I've not seen any actions through the city council to support workers. You also spoke on people needing to having access to resources that are abundant, which I do really support, and I hope that you make the choices to make social services abundant, resources abundant. You were right when you said healthcare is a human right. I stand by that, and I hope that you make decisions to push that forward. And you also spoke on the Black community wanting police presence. And I'm really curious about this comment, and I'd like to know where those people are in the city council meeting and where are they expressing their concerns for a need for policing, because I have spoke to not a single Black person that has.
Our next speaker is Asha Edson, or Asha Edson.
Hi, yeah. Good morning. My name is Asha and I'm a resident. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. My name is Asha. I'm a resident of South Oakland. I go to Pitt and I'm studying American Sign Language. So before I begin, thank you to the ASL interpreters for making today's meeting more accessible. The same cannot be said about the timing of this meeting. The fact that the essential workers that we claim to prioritize can't have a say in this budget because this meeting is at 10 a.m. on a work day and didn't even begin until well after that time is almost laughable. If I were not an earlier speaker, and if multiple other speakers hadn't had to leave, I would have had to leave as well. Since I have the privilege to speak, here's a brief summary of my points. This budget is a slap in the face to the residents we claim to care about. For a city whose PR teams use Mr. Rogers for everything, this budget does not reflect any love for our neighbors. As we are in the middle of a global pandemic, the city of Pittsburgh is full of people suffering. As a grocery store employee from March through October, I've seen countless families having to navigate food stamps for the first time. I've had customers tell me how they check their unemployment status daily, hoping to get money they need to stay afloat. People are scared of going to the hospital for fear of medical bills that they can't pay for. And on top of all of that, people are terrified of the police. So it's not what struggling families need for the Office of Equity's budget to be decreased by nearly 25%, leaving people without the advancement of their well-being and satisfaction of essential needs outlined on the city's website. The elderly and immunocompromised do not need a 16% cut from emergency medical services as COVID-19 cases rise. Essential workers who take the bus every day to provide for the rest of us do not need the 16% slash to the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure's budget. And all citizens of Pittsburgh, especially the Black and brown citizens of the city who have been traumatized by the Pittsburgh police for years, do not need the city's police department budget to be raised by 16%. After watching militarized police descend on a group of peaceful protesters on Center Avenue in June, the residents of East Liberty do not want a new police station, which Stop the Station has made clear with their canvassing. It has been made abundantly clear by the tireless work of Stop the Station and Black Lives Matter organizers that more policing, be it with the Zone 5 station or with a raised budget, is overwhelmingly opposed. The city of Pittsburgh does not want these budget allocations, but more importantly, it does not need them. In a year marked by confronting inequity and the massive upending of the lives of millions, these budget allocations are leaving far too many residents high and dry when they need the city's support the most. The police are not suffering. Their livelihood doesn't rely on a new police cruiser. But this budget prioritizes the wants of the police over the needs of our neighbors. And one last note, I made $11.25 an hour as a cashier this year. I, as a 19-year-old, will be paying more in taxes than the largest employer in Pennsylvania this year. Just sit with that. Overall, I think that earlier speakers said it best when they said that our budget is a moral document. Consider what morals you want this budget to reflect. You need to invest in and protect your citizens, not your police. Black Lives Matter, defund the police. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Zachary Michaels.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So public speaking is not my strong suit. I mostly just want to express agreement and solidarity with what pretty much every caller has been saying. I just graduated in August from the University of Pittsburgh with a joint master's in social work and public health. I still live in Shadyside, but work for Project Destiny, a social service and public health related nonprofit in the North Side. And every day people are calling in asking about how they can get enough food to support their family, how they can avoid eviction, how they can support their kids in remote learning. So there's, I would never claim to be one of the more marginalized people in Pittsburgh, but clearly we have huge needs that need to be addressed, that the police are not the tool to use. And I just want to say, like, I don't want to be antagonistic, but I think that the council collectively should be ashamed that last week you tried to dismiss specifically Ricky Burgess tried to dismiss speakers as being a kind of a small subset of mostly white activists, but then there's been no attempt on your part to have a more accessible meeting time, while the people that you tried to dismiss have been dragging you with petitions and with every single comment to make this more accessible so you can have a wider and more accurate summary of what your constituents really want. So yes, I just want to again reiterate that the police should be defunded, and you all need to decide like how you really conceptualize your jobs. Is it to reach out to constituents and see what they need and to do your absolute best to represent that, or is it just to carry the mayor's water? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alexa Schwartz.
My name is Alexa Schwartz. I'm a resident of Beachview in Councilman Anthony Coghill's district. Hello. I am getting my master's in social work at the University of Pittsburgh. I felt called to social work because of the potential to make a difference. And I hope that the potential to make a positive difference is why you ran for office. As individuals who want to help, we must challenge, not perpetuate oppressive systems. This is why I must contend with social work's complicity with police. This is why I am here asking for an anti-racist budget. I provide mental health services to women in early addiction recovery. I also provide educational support to children experiencing homelessness. Criminalization of substance use and of addiction and of being poor perpetuates so many problems. More policing and more incarceration won't alleviate poverty or improve social conditions. 31 police officers for 1,000 people in a mid-sized city and giving police more and more weapons does not make the city livable. Police do not make us more safe, and kids know that. Mayor Peduto, you responded to protesters at your door with fear by hiding behind police. Why are you afraid of the people you represent? This budget is a budget of fear and a budget of death. We need COVID relief. Our numbers are sky high. We need people to stay home. We need to survive. Your budget defunds emergency medical services during the pandemic. It defunds the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, the Office of Equity, Public Works, and the Fire Department, but it leaves the police funds grossly overfunded. Like Zachary said, don't dismiss us as being activists, a separate group from everyday Pittsburgh people. We are the everyday Pittsburgh people, and the organizers have worked to be engaged with folks who didn't have access to information about this budget because it hasn't been transparent. Before the pandemic, the city's Gender Equity Commission found Pittsburgh to be the worst place for Black women to live for just about every indicator of livability. Are you okay with that? Last week, you said it is uncomfortable to be asked questions and not be able to respond out of respect for the format. Well, you can respond with your action. Do not pass this budget. You say you have, quote, done as much as you're capable of doing, end quote, to address systemic racism with regards to this budget. That's not true because you don't have to pass the budget. Make it an anti-racist budget for Pittsburgh.
Next is Jelena McLaren.
Hi, my name is Jelena McLaren. I live in Bloomfield. I've been a Pittsburgh resident since 2012. I support the demands that you've heard over and over from the Stop the Station Coalition. I'm Black. I say that because for some reason I'm not allowed to turn on my camera, though many folks have. I say that because I don't want Councilman Ricky Burgess to dismiss my comments as he did with many others last Tuesday. I say that because I work in East Liberty in a small office building on Penn Ave above a nail salon, and I would be working exactly 1 block from the planned relocation site for the Zone 5 police station. This is my problem. I don't usually attend these because I'm angry, and I've thought to spare you my anger. I've decided that you do not deserve that reprieve. Ricky Burgess, many have commented on the abhorrent remarks you made last week, so I'll keep this brief. You said something about people getting mad when you put money into Black neighborhoods, and I wanted to clear something up. You've abandoned East Liberty to the developers and to the rich white businesses. It's a travesty what has happened to that neighborhood, and you are to blame. Putting money into Black neighborhoods looks like putting money into community spaces and money into Black citizens' hands. Instead, you put money into corporations and luxury apartments and allowed schools and affordable housing to be torn down to make way. You don't get to talk about Black leadership when you have abandoned your race and your community. You no longer speak for us. To the rest of you and to the mayor, do your research. You claim that people don't want to defund the police. You claim that East Liberty residents want the station moved, but you don't actually know. We've knocked on hundreds of doors to see what the people in the neighborhood want, and a massive majority support our demands. You say that's not everyone, and that's true, but you have done no research and have no data to support your assertions that were wrong. You're just saying it. I'm so tired of you all and of the mayor passing the buck and shifting the blame. We can't defund the police. That's not how it works. That's what you say. You can. You absolutely can. If you fought for it with an ounce of the dedication that we, the activists and everyday citizens you've been dismissing your entire careers, you could do it. You could fight the state when it pushes back as you claim it will. You could fight the mayor when he puts out racist budgets that will directly harm so many people, when he dismisses the lawsuits that would have gotten UPMC taxed in the first place. But you don't do that. You tell us your hands are tied. You're either content to be cogs in the racist machine that is the city of Pittsburgh, or you're cowards. You should be ashamed and you should be afraid. 15% of Allegheny County is facing eviction at the end of the year, and we've all watched police attack peaceful crowds while you stand by and do nothing to keep us safe. We are all so much more politically involved than we've ever been. And since you don't make decisions based on any moral compass, make the decision based on self-preservation. We will come for your seats if you don't pass an anti-racist budget that is good for working people. Do your job or lose it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Howard. Is Elizabeth Howard with us?
Mr. Chair, maybe if, like we do when we're in chambers, if you said the next couple of names, it would help people get ready.
Sure. Although, just for clarity, I'm working off of a list that our people behind the scenes also have, so they're letting them in 4 or 5 at a time. So our next speaker is Jay Walker.
Hi, my name is Jay Ting Walker. I'm a resident of Shadyside in City Council District 8, and I have to run real quick to another meeting, but just in brief summary, I support the Stop the Station Coalition demands. I specifically ask to defund the police 50%, or as much as you can, or like as much as you can, close to 50%. Definitely not an increase in funding. I also support the capital budget amendment that Councilperson O'Connor proposed in the Domi public budget hearing. And I would like to ask Councilperson Strasburger to vote for that budget amendment to move money from the Mon Oakland Connector project to the Housing Opportunity Fund. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Emily DeFari.
Hi, good morning. My name is Emily DeFerrari. I am in zip code 15208. Good morning to the council and to the speakers. I have appreciated all of the comments so far, and mine are very general comments in support of what so far has been said. We have so much work to do in 2021 to pick up the pieces of 2020 and to prove that we are a city that will set its priorities to correct the ingrained inequities that have only deepened in the throes of this pandemic. Scenes from the summer of militarization of our police as they kettled, tear gassed, and used rubber bullets in response to the public outpouring of rage against racism proves that we need to seriously consider what we are paying our police to do. Scenes of the transformation of Penn Plaza from affordable housing to a hulking skeleton of gentrifying greed proves we need to reassess our relationship with developers. Reports of the inequities in health outcomes borne by our Black residents proves that something is terribly wrong in Pittsburgh. Voices have been raised for the last months and today against budgeting money to perpetuate Pittsburgh's inequities. Money to relocate the Zone 5 police station to East Liberty, money to build the Mon-Oakland Connector, a road to carry private vehicles from Pitt and CMU to Hazelwood Green are just two examples. Voices have been raised to tax charitable healthcare behemoths who do not function charitably. UPMC has dodged that bullet. Council has heard these voices. In 2021, the survival of our most vulnerable residents will be a greater risk than most of us can remember in our lifetimes. I'm not able to talk about the specifics of the 2021 budget as others have, but I believe Council is able to make a priority of people's lives and to take a stand against partnerships with private developers that enrich them and impoverish us, and to take a stand against the militarization of our police force. That militarization does nothing to improve our safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Crystal Knight.
Hello, my name is Crystal Martha Knight, and I work for the Thomas Merton Center, and we represent hundreds of Pittsburgh City residents. A little more than 2 months ago, our board voted to support the demands of the grassroots movement to stop the station. Among those demands being to halt the relocation of the Zone 5 police station to East Liberty, canceling the other cuts to the budget, and defunding the police by at least 50%, and lastly, taxing big businesses and corporate developers. What I want to focus on this morning is the reality that when Black and Brown people face a mental health crisis and well-meaning friends and family call the police to help, what ends up happening is that those people are often shot and killed by police rather than helped. Earlier this year, I experienced a mental health crisis. In the panic I felt, I urged my friends not to call the police out of fearing what the police may do. Thankfully, I have a strong support network and those friends responded immediately to get me the help I needed. I was able to bypass any police intervention and get the help I needed with the support of friends, many of whom are equipped to handle crisis situations. My circumstances are what you would call the exceptions and not the rule. Many people are not equipped to handle mental health crises, and in their fear that their loved ones may hurt themselves or others, they call the police, hoping to de-escalate the situation. We know that from example after example, that just isn't the case. Police escalate all situations, and that often means people end up dead at their hands. Of the many viable ways to prevent crime and harm, one logical solution is rather than deploying police to these situations, we should be sending nurses and social workers who are specifically trained to handle mental health crises, with the goal being to get the person experiencing a crisis the help they need or want, rather than jail at best or death at worst. The TMC is a member organization of the PA Poor People's Campaign, and we are fighting for a moral agenda. We are advocating for a peace budget rather than a war budget. When we look locally, we see a militarized police force with a bloated budget. Rather than working to nourish our communities, your budget is prioritizing crime and harm. Take part of that 50% from the police and fund the emergency medical services instead. The city budget relays where our priorities are and acts as your moral budget. While we could be funding affordable housing, public education, living wage union jobs, healthcare initiatives during a pandemic, and so much more, what this budget tells us is the city rather react to harm instead of preventing it in the first place. Please reconsider your priorities and invest in the city's potential, not its worst.
Our next speaker is Andre Signora. Andre Signora. If not, our next speaker is Margaret Stewart, followed by Susanna Deemer. Margaret Stewart.
Hi, my name is Margot. I'm a renter and a software worker in Squirrel Hill. Last week, 44 speakers, including myself and other workers, students, and renters in the city, attended to give public comment to the council, representing hundreds more who could not make a 10 a.m. meeting, but who made emails or calls to their representatives, and over 1,000 who signed Stop the Station's petition for an anti-racist budget or had conversations with our supporters. None of these people are activists floating in a weird ether outside the city. All of these people have their livelihoods directly tied to the outcome of this budget decision. The support for an anti-racist budget is a reflection of a broader mood in the city, as evidenced by the massive wave of protests against systemic racism and police violence this past summer, and the 78% vote this November to expand the powers of the existing civilian police review boards. Working people in the city are serious about racial justice and the need for relief to underserved communities and more democratic input during this crisis. And they're using their time to demand meaningful action from this council, not a smile and a pat on the head. The question of police funding on this budget is not arbitrary in the slightest. It's a question of priorities during an economic crisis where our city is facing unprecedented shortfalls and thousands of residents are at risk of being put out onto the street after a federal eviction moratorium expires at the end of this month. It's a question of should we have $3 million station renovation projects, $90 million training facilities, and an unapproved $25,000 less than lethal ordinance expenditures being made while health, social, and equity jobs are being cut by the hundreds. It's a question of why there's no room to cut police spending when our police force is twice the size of comparable cities, and we have several hundred likely officer retirements on the near horizon. Our police force needs to be directly accountable to the communities they serve, and that includes in matters of spending decisions and priorities. Last week, council members claimed that the measure to defend the police by 50% would be illegal. As others have noted, this claim is false, but even if it were true, it should be the first priority of the city council to take whatever steps necessary to revoke such an arbitrary legal barrier. In an email response I received from Councilmember O'Connor's office to my last comment, I was told that UPMC could not be taxed or stripped of its nonprofit status without state-level intervention, despite the fact that Peduto canceled a case that was aiming to do exactly that when he took office. Even if this is true, then council members need to be putting pressure on the mayor and the state government to make this happen. I will again note that similar movements in Seattle and other cities have won huge big business taxes this year against both existing and new state level resistance. Winning these things is absolutely possible, and the support for them in the community is here. There's enough wealth in our city to cancel the mayor's proposed cuts to essential services and provide relief to working people even beyond that. The suffering we can anticipate from a wave of evictions, from lack of access to healthcare and education, and more can be averted if this council takes meaningful and urgent.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Margaret Stewart. No, I apologize. Our next speaker is Susanna Deemer. Susanna Deemer. Then our next speaker is Matthew Fiorilli.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Matthew Fiorillo. I'm a resident of Stanton Heights, and I want to first just thank everyone here who's here to make a public comment in the middle of the workday. It's so appreciated, and we really look forward to hearing everything that you have to say. Now, as the members of the council probably already know, Pennsylvania General Assembly Act number 265 of 1951 sets the rules that the city is subject to when funding and staffing its police force. Section 9 in particular deals with the question of downsizing the force. And while it does place some restrictions on the city in this regard, it does not by any means prohibit it from doing so. In fact, it lays out in some amount of detail the exact procedure that would need to be followed. As comments made by Police Union President Robert Swartzwelder earlier this year illustrate, to his chagrin maybe, there's actually quite a lot of money to be made from following this exact procedure at this point in time, which is only talking about salary-related expenses. I'm bringing this up just to say that the people of Pittsburgh are aware that this is an option that's available to the city council. And we're aware that if the council does not exercise it, it's doing exactly that, choosing not to. On a related note, and in response to comments made by one of the council members at last week's hearing, the tax exempt status of a corporation such as UPMC as it pertains to taxes paid to the city of Pittsburgh is dictated not by the state, as the council member implied, but by the county, and it's subject to challenge from the city itself at any time. The procedure for delivering such a challenge is straightforward. There's a form, it's online, and the county has shown itself to be fairly sympathetic to these challenges in the last few years. Furthermore, as those of us who remember Ravenstall's very public feud with UPMC in 2013 are aware, the case for challenging UPMC in particular is extremely strong, and the revenues that would be generated from doing so, at least according to the city government in 2013, are on the order of tens of millions of dollars per year. So once again, these options are available to the city council. There are always options available to the city council, and if the council chooses not to exercise them, we're aware that that is not because they're hamstrung by legal requirements or backed into a corner by the state of the economy or anything like this. It's simply the city choosing to impoverish itself while cutting funding to our most important social services. With this in mind, I urge the members of the council, and particularly those who will be up for re-election in the next year, vote like somebody's watching this time. Thank you very much. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dylan Rook.
Hello. Hey, Dylan Rook here. I'm a resident in Hazelwood and, directly impacted by the pandemic this year. It's the first time I've ever been unemployed. I'm a stagehand with the local IOTC 3 in the entertainment industry. And as you can guess, our industry isn't going to be back up and running anytime soon. And I bring that up because I want you to understand that I am one of many in our city who are impacted by this pandemic. And when I see this budget and some key items in this budget, I do not see my family or my neighbors represented in that document. Again, I mentioned I'm from Hazelwood because I'm one of many residents who have been organizing for the last several years, but 2 years in particular around a document called Our Plan, Our Solutions, which is challenging the Mon-Oakland connector proposal in this budget. And I want to take time to thank our councilman, Corey O'Connor, who has been listening to our neighborhoods, not just Hazelwood, but the Run and Oakland, who are directly impacted by this developer-centric plan. And I support the amendments that he has recently put forward, moving $4 million from that capital budget proposal to the housing, $2 million to the Housing Opportunity Fund, $1 million to some Sylvan Avenue upgrades in our neighborhood, and $1 million to the Avenue of Hope, which supports Black-owned businesses in not just our community, but around Pittsburgh. And as I support those amendments, and I urge you to support those amendments as well, I also recognize that it's not enough. In a pandemic, when families a lot like mine are deeply impacted with housing insecurity, job insecurity, we need much more than that. And so whenever we look at a percentage increase in the Pittsburgh police budget, almost pretending that the pandemic does not exist, I urge you to cut that budget by 50% and add more funds to the Housing Opportunity Fund, fund more Black-owned businesses, because honestly, the $4 million is just a drop in the bucket. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening to residents and constituents like me. We're not just some bubble of activists. We are real people living in your districts, and I urge you to take our requests very seriously. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ross Reilly.
Hello, my name is Ross. I'm a resident of Greenfield. I'm commenting first on a slightly different note than most, but actually on the same note as Dylan. I'd like to urge every member of the council to support Councilmember O'Connor's amendment to the budget that would move funds away from the Mon-Oakland connector into the Housing Opportunity Fund, into the Neighborhood Infrastructure Repair in Hazelwood, and into the Avenues of Hope program to protect Black-owned businesses on main streets across the city. When other cities have implemented boutique transit projects like the Mon-Oakland connector, the projects have acted as a source of gentrification that unsustainably raise the cost of housing in the areas around those projects and push out existing communities. Pittsburgh is in the middle of a housing affordability crisis that is compounded by a looming addiction crisis resulting from the ongoing pandemic. We need to fund measures that maintain the character and soul of our neighborhoods and allow our neighbors to stay in their homes and maintain their local businesses. We do not need to fund measures that exacerbate the affordability crisis and act as gifts to tech companies and big businesses. I urge all members of the council to approve this amendment. I felt that was important to highlight and support because the Mon-Oakland Connector has largely been out of public view over its 5-year development schedule, but I don't want to take too much attention away from the seemingly unanimous comments that have been made this week and last about the police budget. I also support returning the budget to the level that it was in 2015 when Mayor Peduto took office and halting the relocation of the Zone 5 police office to East Liberty. The increases over the last 5 years have not left me feeling more safer. On the contrary, I felt less safe as I watched police fire weapons that are banned from international war at our neighbors, the citizens they've sworn to protect. Please instead fund emergency services, social services, and any other services that promote the health and well-being of our city. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Matt Rubin.
Hi, my name is Matt Rubin. I live in Troy Hill, and you know, I have the ability to attend these meetings because I have like the lucky ability to take some time off from work at 10 a.m. on Mondays or Tuesdays to be able to speak here. As many people have said, that is not an ability that many people have. So I just find it really frustrating that this city council was able to recognize that last week and to hold a special hearing in the evening on the paid sick days ordinance, but you can't recognize that same thing about this budget, which is the most important legislative document that this body that you are elected to produces. And that seems to me to be, a choice. It's not an accident. It seems to be a choice because people are telling you this is inaccessible. And I guess I'm just confused where it is that city councilors who are saying that people want to keep the police. Where are you getting that? Because I've been in the past 4 city council meetings about the budget, this meeting and the regular meetings for the past 3 weeks, and I haven't heard a single person take their time to get in these meetings to say, please do not defund the police. Please pass this budget. Now, maybe I haven't heard every single speaker, but I've listened to most of this. I've spent a lot of time in this budget. I haven't heard a single person take their time to tell you this budget's great. The only people I've heard speak in support of this budget are city councilors here. So I'm just curious and confused where it is that you're coming from to say that like the people of Pittsburgh don't want this. The people of Pittsburgh are taking their time, despite very inaccessible meetings, to tell you to defund the police. And on the subject of like whether or not it's illegal, I think people have made the case pretty well so far that it is not illegal to defund the police. But I just want to point out that even if the argument that y'all are making, or that several of you are making, that like the state law would restrict the ability to lay off police officers, which I think like we can put aside that I completely disagree with your interpretation of that, and many people do. The fact is that the restricted ability to lay off currently employed police officers under the very weird interpretation of the law and the police contract that y'all are going with does not require you to buy 20 new police cars in the middle of a pandemic. It does not require you to move a police station in the middle of a pandemic when people want housing, not a new police station in their neighborhood. When it does not require you to build a new training facility for tens of millions of dollars for the entire county that for some reason Pittsburgh, the city, is trying to fund for the entire county. It does not require you to do that stuff, and it does not require you to fill positions when people retire. So there's plenty of options even under the current interpretation. It does not require you to do this budget. And that's putting aside the fact that like, even if you think something's illegal and you think it's wrong, you should fight against it. If you think there's gray area, you should try and pass the thing that's right, like you did with the paid sick days ordinance, knowing that it would be sued and that it was unclear whether the legal interpretation would fall on your side. And speaking of things that like the city council.
Our next speaker is Nathan Smith.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that Matt Rubin just made about the lack of people speaking up for this budget, and no one is speaking against defunding the police. So just a really great point there. My name is Nathan Smith. I live in Squirrel Hill. And this budget comes at a time when Allegheny County continues to break records of coronavirus cases day after day. People have been forced out of their jobs and families face eviction from their homes. Everyone's well-being has gotten a lot worse this year. So what does this budget propose to do? It defunds jobs and essential social service programs. It slashes the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure by 16%, emergency medical services by 16%, the Office of Equity by 24%, Public Works by 26%, and the Fire Department by 8%. All of this while preserving a police budget that has been increased by 50% in the last 5 years under Peduto. And it preserves plans for a multi-million-dollar police station. The police serve no purpose in fighting this pandemic. And as was expressed in this summer's protest movement, police actively make some people's lives worse. Yet the police are the winners in this budget. One of the few departments not impacted or barely impacted by cuts. Last week, City Council member Ricky Burgess said it would be illegal to cut the police budget. A lot of people have brought this up. Act 265, Section 9 of the PA law. Cities do have the power to move funds from the police to other more necessary departments. Cities across the country have done this. We were behind. We also want big corporate profits to be taxed. They are making huge profits from the plight and the sickness of Pittsburghers. UPMC, record profits during this pandemic. They're not taxed by the city. And this is a huge source of funds. A lot of people have been saying this too, and it can be done. And that's, been demonstrated by the city of Seattle's recent tax on Amazon. It's a very similar situation, and it's helped people's lives immeasurably. And that's what your job is to do, to make a better city of Pittsburgh. Things can be done to make people's lives better. This budget actively makes people's lives worse. Defund the police, tax UPMC, and fund social services. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alice Bell. Or Elise Bell?
Yes, Alice. Yes, my name's Alice Bell. As someone who has lived and worked in Pittsburgh for over 20 years, it is my strong opinion that in a time of great strain on the financial and real physical health of our community, our resources should not be going to fund continued police response to the majority of problems that we face. The vast majority of interactions with police, citizens involve issues related to traffic safety, behavioral health related issues, and problems related to poverty. These are problems that cannot be effectively addressed by someone carrying a gun. Police are not only ineffective in addressing problems related to drug use, homelessness, and mental health, but create actual harm to people who are already suffering. And these harms inordinately affect Black members of our community. Systemic racism built into policing from the start and perpetuated through the years can't be reformed away. While Black residents make up only 13% of the population of Allegheny County, over 50% of people incarcerated in our county jail are Black. This stark fact demonstrates how our systems of policing, courts, and jails maintain inequality and oppression. I work for Prevention Point Pittsburgh, an organization that provides public health and social service interventions for people who use drugs in various Pittsburgh communities. In that capacity, I see firsthand on a daily basis the negative impact of police engagement with the people we provide services to. We need to develop new systems for addressing real public safety that provide support and assistance to people rather than violence and coercion, which are baked into our current system. At a time of economic hardship created by the current pandemic, we're confronting a budget crisis. More and more city residents are facing food and housing insecurity. We can't possibly contemplate maintaining the already bloated level of police funding at the expense of slashing budgets for EMS, public works, fire, mobility, and infrastructure. How can this formula possibly serve to address the COVID-19 crisis, systemic racism, widening inequality that we're seeing in Pittsburgh? I support community calls to transfer funding from police budgets to address education, healthcare, mental health care, housing, and income inequality. The needs of our community that we'll face in the coming year will be great, and propping up a, quote, public safety system that does not promote or protect real safety is not in the best interest of the Pittsburgh community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is LaVon Ritter. LaVon Ritter. Don't see the name. Our next speaker is Helen Gearhart, followed by Ziggy Edwards. Helen Gearhart. I don't see Ms. Gearhart. Ziggy Edwards.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. I want to start by echoing comments earlier in the meeting to make these meetings more accessible to all and demilitarize the police. I'm Ziggy Edwards and I live in the Run. For the past 2 years, I've been speaking to you about the zombie Mon-Oakland connector plan that shambles along, fueled by wealthy private interests, unfazed by a pandemic and the resulting $100 million Pittsburgh budget shortfall. And I want to thank my representative, Councilman O'Connor, for introducing an amendment that reallocates the $4 million proposed MOC funding for 2021 to affordable housing, support for small businesses, and infrastructure maintenance. Especially now, Pittsburghers need those things more than a road through Shenley Park to accommodate the Simpsons monorail. Councilman O'Connor, you understand why the MOC will harm some neighborhoods in your district beyond diverting limited resources. You know the long history of making plans for Panther Hollow in the Run while excluding people who live here. We are at risk of being erased, not only by flooding in the Run, but by those who see our communities in Shenley Park as barriers to their vision of economic growth. Instead of responding to our legitimate concerns about the MOC, public employees twisted those concerns to seem like a baseless fear of progress. They tried to pit neighboring communities against each other. They filed fraudulent grant applications and applied for new grants without telling us. They used public meetings for timeshare marketing tactics rather than honest discussion, pretending to consider alternative routes for the shuttles before again settling on Shenley Park. They responded to right-to-know requests with claims of attorney-client privilege and a 7,185-page unsearchable PDF. They obscured and constantly changed details such as the route. And recently, several of my neighbors who live near one of the rejected alternative routes received letters from DOMI implying they may lose their homes and businesses through eminent domain. These are not the actions of people with good intentions. If the MOC benefited those who live in the communities it affects, Mayor Peduto's administration would not need to resort to duplicity and steamrolling. Furthermore, if Hazelwood Green's powerful owners had no desire to annex Shenley Park and adjoining neighborhoods, they would drop their single-minded focus on getting shovels in the ground as soon as possible and instead support alternative plans such as Our Money, Our Solutions that more effectively meet their stated goals without causing the harms of MOC. And by the way, that alternative plan has a petition with over 1,200 signatures and growing every day. Personally, I'd like to see that energy and money that's being spent on the MOC and redirected toward helping my neighbors all over Pittsburgh keep their homes and businesses, and finally fixing the hazardous sidewalks of city-owned parcels along Irvine Street in Hazelwood. We need City Council to vote yes on Councilman O'Connor's amendment. And with this amendment, you can stop MOC from trampling our communities and bring relief to the entire city. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Emma Benjaminson.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, sir. Hello, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Emma, and I live in South Squirrel Hill neighborhood. I'm here as a supporter of the Stop the Station movement, and I just wanted to say that I agree with that movement and many of the other speakers on this call today that we don't support the mayor's proposed budget. It does not address inequality and racism that exists in our community. I ask that the council votes to change the operating budget to decrease the police budget by at least 50% and redirect the funds towards housing, social services, public health initiatives, and equitable transportation. I also asked the council to halt all police-related infrastructure projects and purchases in the capital budget, including the relocation of Zone 5's police station, and instead invest in permanently affordable social housing. The council and the mayor should also fight to tax big businesses and corporate developers and challenge UPMC's tax-exempt status to address the ongoing budget crisis and fully fund well-paid union jobs, housing, healthcare, and public education. Lastly, I agree with the other speakers that this process should be made more democratic and accessible. I'm very fortunate that I have the privilege of a flexible work schedule that allows me to speak today. But there are so many hardworking people who don't have that privilege, but they should also have the opportunity to make their voices heard. And I think we should move this meeting time to make it possible for them to speak as well. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and please stay safe.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Caitlin Kerr, followed by Patrick Wishon. Caitlin Kerr. Caitlin Kerr, I do not see the name. Our next speaker is Patrick Wilshon.
Hi, so my name's Patrick Wishon. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm a resident of Bloomfield. This is my third week in a row coming here to ask you to defund the police in the proposed 2021 budget, and I stand in solidarity with all of the comments that everyone else before me and after me will make. This past summer, people all across the country demanded that their governments begin defunding the police. If this budget is passed, it shows a complete disregard for what is actually important to your electorate, the people you work for, the people who chose you. People came out in large numbers to the last meeting, and it seemed like many of you weren't actually interested in what we had to say, saying things like that a group of white activists was telling you what to do with Black communities, and also implying that things like domestic violence weren't real crime. So I'm here to make the same points again, and maybe this time it will get through to you. Data gathered by the ALC shows that while Black residents make up only 23.2% of the Pittsburgh population, they experienced 44% of all traffic stops, 71% of all frisks, 69% of all warrantless search and seizures, and 63% of all arrests conducted by the Pittsburgh police in 2019. While the population of Allegheny County is less than 13% Black, the population of the Allegheny County Jail is 67% Black. Out of the 415 Black and white Allegheny County residents arrested from May 11th to June 8th on a misdemeanor charge, misdemeanors which are criminal offenses such as disturbing the peace, petty theft, public drunkenness, traffic violations, trespassing, graffiti, disorderly conduct, public lewdness, and issuing a bad check, it was only the Black community members who were denied bond altogether. This is a criminal punishment system that meets the legal definition of apartheid due to its being sanctioned by the government at every jurisdictional level. How much longer do you plan to ignore this? The question that we need to ask ourselves is if you really believe that 13% of Allegheny County's residents are more predisposed to committing crimes than the rest. What you're seeing here, what this data shows, is that the police are targeting Black communities and arresting them at unwarranted rates. The message that this budget sends is that as a city, you would prefer to focus on targeting and arresting the Black community instead of helping to keep the community safe during a pandemic. Bill Peduto cuts emergency medical services by about 17%. Housing is a human right, but it also keeps the entire community safe by providing people a place to quarantine. Defund the police by at least 50% and use that money to avoid the mayor's cuts to every department but the police. Halt all police-related infrastructure projects and purchases in the capital budget and invest in democratically owned, permanently.
Our next speaker is Alicia Salvadeo.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm Alicia Salvadeo. I teach high school downtown. I'm a member of Socialist Alternative and an organizer with Stop the Station. We've collected over 1,100 signatures at change.org/PGH budget 2021. Thanks to everyone on the call for fighting for the city we deserve. I'm hearing there are still people waiting to be let in or let back in, including Black activists. We hear over and over, let's reimagine the city and policing, but when it comes to defunding the bloated police budget or taxing UPMC, there's a selective failure of the imagination, of political will, and of leadership. State law lays out what you can do to decrease police budgets in times of economic crisis. Regardless, grassroots movements across the country challenge state preemptions all the time for big business taxes, for minimum wage hikes, and they win. This is the deepest recession since the Great Depression. The FOP contract allows the mayor and public safety director to adjust the size of the bureau in the interests of public safety, which right now is best served by permanently affordable social housing and community-led social services, not rooted in policing. Public Source reported this morning that the majority, about 600 of Pittsburgh police officers have allegations of misconduct against civilians. That sounds like a hostile threat to public safety, and that's why we need a democratically elected civilian oversight board with teeth and the power to fire, discipline, set policy, and set budgets. Defund the police by at least 50%, back to where the police budget was before Petito raised it by as much. And let's start with the offenders and then the hundreds up for retirement. We need to save other public sector jobs vital to public health, safety, and equity, including emergency medical services. Vote down funding for weapons purchases and multi-million-dollar police projects. East Liberty residents have seen it reimagined as their neighbors are forced out of their homes. I'm not sure how Burgess can forget the hundreds evicted from Penn Plaza, many of them Black, low income, disabled, and elderly, when there's a big dirt field in the middle of your district. Rest assured, we have not forgotten. You have the responsibility to pass an anti-racist budget that works for Black and working class families. Cease corporate tax breaks for developers whose luxury apartments sit empty right now while families of the students I teach face evictions, unemployment, and a lack of childcare. UPMC CEO Jeff Ramoff takes home $9 million a year while thousands of underpaid employees can't afford healthcare. His salary alone can house 50 to 60 families in newly built homes. Burgess counts himself among the rare few who are pro-business and pro-worker. Maybe that has more to do with the impossibility of that statement. You can't serve two masters. You can't serve the same people you allow developers to evict and corporations to exploit and police to abuse. If Black lives truly matter, if you care about working class families struggling through these pandemic and economic crises, you will prioritize our housing, our health, and our livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jeff Wozniak.
Hi, sorry, it's actually Jesse, but I'm Dr. Jesse Wozniak. I'm an associate professor of criminology with an emphasis on policing at West Virginia University, but I live up here on the East End. So as a scientific police researcher, I want to bring empirical scientific evidence, which is quite relevant to this conversation. As has already been mentioned, Pittsburgh is one of the most heavily policed medium-sized cities in America, ranking 9th out of all medium-sized cities. But neither our violent nor property crime rates come anywhere near explaining this amount of police presence. In fact, if we compare to all cities in the nation, Pittsburgh is in the top 3% most heavily policed jurisdictions in the United States. If we were to cut our police force in half, that would merely put us at the middle of the pack for the average number of police officers per 10,000 residents. And this is important because while it seemingly makes intuitive sense that more police and more funding for police would reduce crime, the empirical reality is that it does not. While the relationship between these two variables are complex, the scientific findings regarding the outcome of the relationship is both simple and clear. We have long since passed the point where additional police have any measurable impact on incidences of crime or on the solving of crime. In fact, all of the empirical evidence shows we can easily reduce the number of police we have with no impact on the amount of crimes committed or the amount of crimes solved. And additionally, what the scientific literature on this subject has made crystal clear is that like in most areas of life, prevention is far more effective. Most recent studies have found that every dollar spent on social programs, such as early childhood education or job training, saves $5 to $7 in the back end on criminal spending later. A great example of this is that while I don't have local numbers, national numbers are showing a strong uptick in shoplifting food during the pandemic. This is not something to be solved by policing. This is something to be solved by giving people food and the money they need to buy food. Similarly, there are many great places we could make cuts. As others have mentioned, 280 police are up for retirement right now. That could simply not be replaced. Another great cut could be drawn from the public source article just released this morning that shows one single officer in Pittsburgh has been the subject of 119 allegations of misconduct since 2010. Basically, the simplest reform for racial justice we can have in this city is having fewer police. There will empirically be no risk of increased crime, but there will be measurable improvements for the lives of poor Black and brown Pittsburghers. I urge you to reduce funding and the number of police officers as not only morally correct, but a scientifically correct approach to the pandemic and racial justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pauline Criswell. Pauline Criswell, whom I do not see. Our next speaker is Douglas Weaver. Is Douglas Weaver with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Doug Weaver. I'm a homeowner in Garfield. I've lived in the city of Pittsburgh for 25 years, and I'm a 13-year veteran of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire. While I do not speak on behalf of the Bureau or any affiliated organization, my being a firefighter provides context for what I'm about to say. Across the city, our firefighters are driving engines and trucks that are consistently in disrepair. While this occurs, the Bureau of Police accounted for a fifth of the city's operating budget for 2020. The budget that the mayor has submitted for 2021 has the police poised to receive a similar percentage, while the Bureau of Fire takes an 8% cut, not to mention cuts to emergency medical services, the Office of City Planning, and the Office of Equity, all of which are agencies tasked with taking care of the well-being of the citizenry of Pittsburgh. This just doesn't make sense. The simple fact is that the Bureau of Police does not in any way give taxpayers a return on their investment. In fact, through many of its members' atrocious and violent behavior, the Police Bureau ends up costing the taxpayers even more because of settlements arising from unnecessary use of force litigation. The idea that the city can defund all of the aforementioned agencies while not doing so to the agency that the people of this city have been calling to be defunded since May is a travesty and a failure of leadership on the part of both the mayor and city council. I call on city council to scrap the mayor's proposed budget and submit one that reflects the real needs of the people of this city, some of whom are struggling more than ever now due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Needs such as permanently affordable housing, an emergency services team dedicated to responding to mental health crises that the police are ill-trained to handle, social programs and facilities for all demographics, including youth and the elderly, as well as infrastructure projects throughout the city. Lastly, I'd like to point out to council that the local media painted the more than 40 citizens who called to voice their concerns with this budget proposal last week as activists, and I anticipate that happening again this week, as if being an activist and staying involved in our democracy is somehow a bad thing or makes one's opinions less valid. This is simply a way of othering, a way to make it seem as though all of these people calling to voice their concerns are not tax-paying, voting Pittsburghers. The people who called last week, the people who are calling today, they are Pittsburghers. They're your constituents. Please keep that in mind as you listen to them express their concerns to you, our representatives, our elected representatives. Thank you for your time. I implore you to act on what you heard last week and on what you're hearing today. Do right by the people of this city.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laura Weiss. I do not see Laura Weiss. Our next speaker is Ray Gerard. Our next speaker would be Tiara Collins. If not, then our next speaker is Brandy Fisher. Brandy, I do see your name.
Brandy texted me that she's at the dentist.
Oh.
So I don't know if she'll be able to call back in or be available
No, she's
later.
here.
She back?
We can't hear you, Brandy.
Her volume, something's wrong with her audio. Brandy, do you have any earplugs? She said
Okay.
she's gonna go out and
Call back in. All right.
right.
So we have, I believe we have Caitlin Kerr.
I thought she had already spoke.
Okay. So Madam Clerk, as we wait for Brandy to call back in, is there anyone who is not on the registered list that we now need to let in to speak?
David would have to tell us if there's anyone in the waiting room that wishes to speak that haven't spoke. I have no way of seeing. Let's see.
There are 7 people in the waiting room that are not on the registered speakers list. It is up to you how you want to decide, what you want to decide moving forward.
Okay, David, if you could maybe let them in one at a time, and we'll just go speaker number 1, speaker number 2.
Would you give them a 1 minute? The time?
Yes.
Okay, 1 minute, David.
Okay, we'll give them a 1 minute time limit. We'll let them in.
You so
Brandy's on.
David, if you name them number 1, number 2, so I can see them on the screen, and then I'll call them. We also have Brandy who did call back in. Brandy Fisher?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. I was at the dentist and I did write something for today that I don't have with me. So I'm not going to echo all of the data you've heard, or a lot of the talking points that you heard over and over again. But first, I want to say thank you, Councilman Lavelle, for the way that you have conducted the process today, and making sure when somebody didn't answer that you gave them some time to answer. Those little things do matter. And secondly, I want to thank Councilwoman Deb Gross for being a champion of the people, meaning a champion of policy that impacts people's lives, and always on the side where it centers people. And we appreciate you so very much. I personally don't understand, after hearing everything, what is it going to take for you all to understand what is needed. I have a relationship with most of you. I believe decent people do decent things. And I'm really at a point where I just don't understand what you're not hearing, what you're not getting, or what it is that you need to hear to see Coghill, to understand that the police are a problem often. And even if we're not going to highlight the fact that police are a problem, and we're just looking at the budget, and where is it best to put funding? Where is it best to take funding from? And what is the greatest need right now? If we're talking about jobs, I hear people saying, oh, defunding the police. You don't like the word. People are going to lose jobs. We don't mind cutting other people's jobs. We don't mind cutting EMS. We don't hear an outcry for cutting other people's jobs. It's just this outcry about police. And the institution of policing in this city has been a problem. And I am going to spend my time telling you my personal experience. That still bothers me to this day. We saw all the protests happening this year. I attended some. I didn't attend a whole lot of them, but I attended enough. I heard activists telling me that the things being said about them in the media were lies, that they weren't just being violent, that they weren't agitating, that they weren't starting these things, that it was the police. I have not had that in my experience of protesting. And so it's in this city. And so it took me a minute to accept that as the truth. I'm being honest. So what I did was I took my body down there myself to see what people were dealing with and to see if what they were telling me was true and to see how much something was exaggerated or not. The day that, and that day was the day most of you probably saw the video of me on the mayor's porch. That day, I walked with people who were protesting to Mellon Park as we were instructed. That day, we were told to be there. And once we got there, we were told that the park was closed. We listened.
So thank you, Brandy. And just as a reminder, unfortunately, everyone only has 3 minutes, but you can also submit written testimony to City Council. I do know we had a number of registered speakers who could not stay on the line and did submit their testimony to council. We'll make sure all members get that. Now we want to bring in those who were unregistered. If you were unregistered, you do get 1 minute to speak. I'm gonna hope this is going to work out right. So I have speaker number 1. If you take yourself off of mute.
That me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I don't know why Zoom called me, whatever it calls me. So Pittsburgh's a city of neighborhoods. And in those neighborhoods, we know what keeps us safe. It's looking out for each other at the school bus stop. It's having enough food to eat, decent place to live. It's clean streets, air and water. It's having a decent job and access to affordable health care when we're sick. It's having a reasonable expectation at the end of the day, our loved ones will return home safely and in one piece. But too often we're not spending our public dollars in a way that reflects those values. Earlier this year, I was part of a group of activists dedicated to keeping Pittsburgh safe, demonstrating against the Trump administration's racist and violent policies. The group that chose peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience were met with a combat-ready assault team with guns drawn. Each demonstrator was surrounded by a wall of armed shock troops in full battle dress and marched backwards to a large Black Maria paddy wagons. It was a scene straight out of a very dark time in the first half of the last century.
Thank you very much. We now have a registered speaker who was with us, who is now in the meeting. And I believe that is Pauline Criswell.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pauline Criswell, and I'm here representing the Perry Hilltop Citizens Council as a board member. And so I am in favor of defunding the police by 50% for reasons being that the police department, their job is to protect and serve our communities. And that has for years, that just, unfortunately, that has not been happening. Their job is not to hurt, harm, and to kill. Sad to say, across the board, this is what's been going on, even here in the Perry Hilltop area. Many days, you know, I'm watching, I'm looking, I'm calling, and I've even made phone calls where I've asked for dispatchers to send police for a nightclub that is just a little less than a block from my home. Rarely are they ever on time. Rarely are there arrests made. I said, what does it take for someone to get killed here in order for something to really take place? So just a month ago, there was a shooting there. And I've sent complaints over and over in regards to this matter. So I'm just really looking for something to happen, something to be done. And that's basically that. That's all that I have.
I got some extra options than you. I need them. I need that person tomorrow. The ones they get home.
We can hear you, Ms. Criswell.
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have speaker number 2. The first name is Maya.
Hello, my name is Maya Iliff. I live in Shadyside, and I am speaking to implore you all to use your power to make changes and to look at this budget in terms of a problem-solving mindset, and to cancel this budget and defund the police by 50%, and to stop the Zone 5 police station's relocation to East Liberty. I also am calling for the taxation of large corporations and big developers in the interests of citizens and working class people. That's including UPMC, who is profiting, like many other large corporations, off the deaths of hundreds and thousands of Pittsburghers. And I would like for housing to be funded, transportation to be more equitably funded, healthcare to be considered as a human right under the budget, and for public education to be prioritized everywhere in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our third speaker is Kalea Vidal.
Hi, yes, my name is Kayla Vidal, and I am a Pittsburgh resident. And to echo all the other comments, I want to express my dissatisfaction on the budget and how it does not focus on the residents. Basically, yes, I support defunding the police and also putting the meetings at a more better time for people to attend and be present and be active in their community. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see a number 4, but I do have a number 5. Number 5 is Joanna Deming.
Good afternoon, everybody. I did register, so I'm not sure what happened with that. And I'm really glad Pauline got to speak. She's one of our board members, so I'm really glad she was able to attend today and stuck with all some technical difficulties that she had speaking. But yes, I live in Perry Hilltop. I'm the executive director for Fineview and Perry Hilltop Citizens Councils, which are 2 neighborhood groups in the heart of the North Side. Our organizations haven't taken official position on the budget, but I wanted to share my thoughts based on the sessions that we've held over the summer regarding policing, as well as ongoing conversations. What I've heard from my Black and brown neighbors is that people want someone to call when there's a violent crime. They want the police to develop relationships with them and treat them with this dignity and respect. I witnessed, and there are too many stories of Pittsburgh police misusing their power to the extent even of abuse of residents. Pittsburgh police treating Black kids one way and Black teens and adults another way. For myself personally, I have not experienced this. Obviously, the system was made to protect me as a white woman, to prioritize my needs, to look the other way when I commit a crime, or when I am speeding, or when I run a stoplight. But I think it is very important that my neighbors are able to be treated well and with the same respect and protection that I am afforded. Our community has been over-policed for a long time. It's time to change that. Law enforcement and prisons go against building a healthy community, significantly limiting what we can do to improve people's lives. We are grateful for the police reforms passed by council, and we are excited about new funding for violence prevention. We are currently working on a violence prevention initiative with the University of Pittsburgh, where residents will work together to build a safer, healthier community. There are many great diversion programs in Pittsburgh from Foundations of Hope, and I'm excited that they will be supported. In addition, we are extremely grateful for some recent investments in our parks and infrastructure. Fineview Park is an amazing asset. We've seen more roads paved in the last year than in many years. But we need to, in order to continue to reverse past patterns of disinvestment, we'll need to see a larger boost in additional investments in our neighbors in good jobs, and in affordable housing. As we make those investments, the need for police will be reduced dramatically. Yet we can't wait to shift funding from police. An article entitled "Landlords Challenge U.S. Eviction Ban and Continue to Oust Renters" by Kristen Capps stated that when tenants are evicted, they are often moved.
Thank you. Our next speaker, I don't have a name for, so I'm gonna have to call the phone number. I believe it says speaker number 6. 412-225-1512.
Yes, speaking. My name is Levon Ritter. And I'm here to say that I think it's totally necessary to defund the police at this point. It's not a matter of, he said, she said, like, how bad are they, what they did. It's a necessity, because this austerity budget is potentially deadly. I mean, we need people to have somewhere to live during a pandemic if it goes into next year. Vaccines probably aren't coming that soon for regular citizens, at least. And I can't stress enough. The money that we pay the police goes to a force that largely lives outside city limits, and that takes money directly out of our city. And if we criminalize poverty and homelessness, like so many people are going to be out. They need relief. This budget has to go back into the city itself. We can't put it into the police. No matter, I don't care if you respect them or not. This is a matter of the city's survival, because things can only get worse if we don't have good transit, good housing, and stability throughout the city. Moreover, the big nonprofits that make millions of dollars a year and have CEOs with extravagant salaries need to be taxed. It's ridiculous how much they get away with. It's practically theft. They're practically robbing the city blind. We need that revenue. We can't with this austerity budget. So please take some money away from the police. 50%. I agree with that. And just help us, please. People are really suffering right now, and we can't put them out in the cold in a pandemic. And the only option is go to jail. That's not right. That's terrible. Please do not revise this budget dramatically. It can't stand the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Feiner or Madam Clerk, I believe we've exhausted both our registered speaker list as well as those waiting in the waiting room. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. That means we will now open it up to members if they choose to, if they would like to take a moment to share any thoughts they may have. I do know our president, Councilwoman Kale Smith, would like to speak.
Thank you, Councilman Lavelle. I just want to thank you first for chairing the meeting. I've had a family emergency, and I have two 2-year-olds, a 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old here. So that's why my camera's off, and I wanted to apologize. But I did hear what everyone was saying, and have been talking with other members about different times for the meeting. So we'll continue to talk about that and try to figure out a time to schedule those, hopefully within the week. So I just want to thank everyone for coming down. And I'm not sure how I'm voting on all the budget amendments today, but I am open to some of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other members who would like to speak? I'll go in the order in which I saw a hand go up. Councilman Coghill. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Lavelle. Sorry about that. I want to thank everybody for calling in. You know, we do hear you. You know, your passion, shines through. Let me start with a couple things I do agree with you on. Taxing the nonprofits. If that's within our power, and someday maybe it will be, That's something's got to give there. Okay, so I agree with the callers on that. More accessible meetings. I'm game for any time, any day. Make them more accessible. I think we don't typically get overrun of phone calls, on our weekly meetings. And I don't think it's because they're not as accessible as they should be. I think it's just because sometimes there's a topic that comes up like the budget that warrants that. So let me talk about defunding the police. When I hear the callers calling about 50% defunding the police, nothing could be more irresponsible and premature. Our police department, and the survey came out from the Post-Gazette last week as the top 10 medium-sized cities. I just want to say one thing, how facts can be very skewed through this. Number one, if you look at those cities like Newark, Birmingham, Rochester, Jersey City, Richmond, one thing you don't see there that's not factored in this data is professional sports teams and venues. As a major city that has 3 or 4 professional sports teams and venues at each of them, it requires us 75 to 100 police officers per event. And that's just on the actual facility. That doesn't include the streets and sometimes what problems and chaos ensues when you put 70,000 people in a stadium. So it's very important for the Pittsburgh police to have a pool of 100 or so police officers readily on hand. If you look in this top 10 medium-sized businesses, all of the cities like Cincinnati, St. Louis, Cleveland, Atlanta are all very much higher than us because they have the same issues as we do. I would beg to differ. Birmingham, Rochester, and Richmond do not. Another thing that's not factored in there is the terrain. Okay, in 2004, there was a study done by the International Association of Police Chiefs, and things that were considered that should be considered in any police force is terrain. In our city, it's difficult to get from zone 6 to zone 5. We're not flat. We have windy, twisty roads and throw in a snowstorm. And, that requires us to have more police officers on call. We're not flat. We can't speed across the city in a matter of minutes. Population density, that's the major factor. People is not also factored in any of these surveys or studies you've seen. So I'm just pointing out a few things. That was about 2 minutes looking into that reasons why we are police at where we're at. I think we're at the right level. I think in saying that, we also realize the changes and the things that we need to do to evolve. I think we're on the right path. I think we have $5 million invested into the human services and Stop the Violence Fund. And I'm very confident that we're going to come out of that with something good through the conversations that we've had. In the future, if we do find a recipe where we can get social workers in the communities where it actually alleviates police calls, I'll be the first one signed up to move money towards that. But you don't go defunding the police, certainly by 50%, until you find something that can work where you can reallocate that money. And you can only do that if we can alleviate the police from those calls. So I'm confident where we're at. I know that the will is there with this council to, look at all of these things, make these changes. It's not as simple as defunding the police 50%. And I will say to those who threaten our elections, and they will remember us come election time, you won't have to advertise in my district. If you find an opponent of mine who is willing to take your support to cut the police by 50%, I will advertise that for you because I think the people in the South Hills have a lot more common sense than that. So with that, I just want to make those comments. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say I really appreciate everyone who came out today and that President Smith has offered to try to figure out a way that we can have meetings or hearings in a way that more people can participate. It's been a chronic problem. We've all heard it before. We do have public comment every time we are called to order, which is generally Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 10 in the morning. But we have had post agendas and as we had recently in the evenings, and we've had public hearings in the evenings. And even though we are required to pass this budget by the end of December, it does stay open for a number of weeks, technically. Madam Clerk, do you have a date by which we kind of every year, we still are able to do operating budget amendments?
January 15, I believe.
January 15th would only be a couple weeks.
believe.
And we generally are referring to it as 4 or 5 weeks, not
I think
2 weeks.
Bill's on.
Yeah, this would be the first week of February. It's a 5-week period. That's according to the code.
Okay, so a 5-week period taking us to the first Tuesday, or I guess the first week of February would have to be final vote. And so amendments would be discussed up until the week before that, something like that, Mr. Bannock, probably?
That's correct.
Thank you. And we've done that before. I've seen it, we've done it as a council. And so we have that capacity. And certainly in the many, many hours that we did of budget hearings in the last couple of weeks, it was a lot. It was certainly, I think that the public is still kind of processing what all of the cuts to other departments will mean in terms of service impact. I tried to ask those questions to directors as we were having those exchanges, which the public can see on YouTube now, which is really helpful. It's easier to navigate than our Legistar system. And I was particularly concerned about a 20% cut effective January 1st to permits, licenses, and inspections, which sounds a little bit academic, but it's more than just your block watch permit. If you're going to build affordable housing, you need the permits. If you're going to inspect substandard housing, which we've had kind of notorious problems across the city with landlords who are not treating renters fairly, that's permits, licenses, and inspections, or PLI. If we're going to be reinvesting in, for example, avenues of hope and supporting small businesses, they need people to work with at permits, licenses, and inspections. To do this work, we have to resource our city departments to do it. I could certainly share with you many complaints from small businesses who had to wait 10, 12 weeks in order to do the work that they needed. They'd submitted all the paperwork, and they'd done their end, and then we're forced to just kind of sit and wait because of processing time takes so long. Similarly, we're really struggling and way behind, I think, in zoning and planning on the kind of powers we could be using to make neighborhoods more livable, and to stand up to big developers and to do development better, to manage growth better, and to do investments where we want to do investments for public good, and kind of heat up the markets that are broken or cool down the markets that are overheated, and do I think it's the rightful role of local government and land use authority to use our land use powers to build the city that our citizens are calling on us to build. And that takes bodies in city planning. And I think we should replace the positions that were cut. I also heard last week testimony from the Parks and Recs Director Chapman, who said that it's just for the lack of a few more staffing, he could be distributing more meals. I think we should replace those positions. And I submitted amendments to the ad hoc committee or body, whatever it was, last week with Councilman Lavelle and Councilwoman Smith and Councilman Burgess that I understand are not going to be on the table, that they rejected, to replace those positions using the money from our police budget. As I said to the mayor last week, we slashed all city departments, and he lived through it dramatically under austerity amendments or austerity measures under Act 47. And those other departments have not recovered. And he even said, you're right, they're too close to the bone, their budgets. There's not really room to cut more. And yet the police budget has recovered, and there's room to cut. And all of those positions could be replaced for a mere $9 million. And I think it turns not even 9 million. Sorry, I misspoke. 9 police officers. It's less than $1 million. It's less than 1% of the police budget. So it's very, very modest amendments. And I hope to talk more about that at 1:30. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have now.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Gross. Other members wishing to speak?
I'll just say one thing. So first of all, always we want to thank all of the people who have called in, made their voices heard. I have in a number of places listed, both in Pittsburgh Black Matters page, this variety of pages, why we cannot legally cut the police force. And I don't know that members have thought it through or know how that works, that even if we could cut the police, the first round of cuts would go to those people who are eligible for pensions. So we would take our best officers, our most seasoned officers in the midst of COVID, those who have risked their lives to be first responders, the heroes of our cities. They would be the first ones that we would cut. If we were to, if we could lay off police officers, that's the first group that would have to go. We cannot, so we're not gonna, because we can't. We could vote it will be overturned in court because we cannot. Our budget is balanced. Our budget does not show a deficit. Therefore, we cannot legally cut the force. What I've said for the last 3 months over and over again, and I understand the political, the need to make political statements, and I understand that. But what I've said and have yet to be contradicted, the only way legally that you can reduce the police force is by not hiring new officers, which is what I've done. And if we don't hire new officers, over time by attrition, we will reduce the number of officers. I am supportive of that. We do have to reimagine police. I agree with that 1,000%. I have argued and advocated, Councilman Lavelle and I and other members of council, for affordable housing. However, I do want to suggest to you, and if you want to have this conversation this afternoon, that's fine. But the defunding of the police movement nationally talks specifically about African Americans and African American communities. And if we are going to talk about equity, I want to talk about racial equity. And I want to hear, I don't think this is intended. I know it's not intended, but if we are not specifically talking about increasing investments in African American communities, trying to tie the reduction of the police budget to anything that does not do that specifically. I'll talk about this afternoon there, but I'm sure that's not wasn't intended. But to do that in this time would be deeply, 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 deeply offensive. Because this issue is geared specifically to African Americans. This is not a time to figure out ways to get more money to the majority of the community. And I think to use the defunding language in order to fund things that are important to the majority of the community, although I don't know if that's the intention, but if that is the intention, that would be extraordinarily sad. And of course, something I would vehemently oppose. But thank you, Mr. Chair, for your leadership, and thank everybody who's commented. The other thing is, and I just technically, the budget, although closes after the 5th week, the council with the mayor, we can agree jointly to open the budget anytime. So the capital budget stays open, and we can change the operating budget with consent of the mayor and the council anytime during the year. So the budget is actually never really closed. That's just a technical conversation since we're having a conversation about the budget. Thank you very much for this moment.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Any other member wishing to speak? Councilwoman Strasburger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you for chairing this meeting and handling all of these technical issues that we had today. I also want to thank everyone for coming out on a Monday at 10 a.m. for those of you who are able to make it. And I want to respond to something that was brought up these last few weeks, which is that this isn't the most convenient time for people. And I completely agree. Next year, by next year's budget time, I'm really hoping that we can overhaul the way that we do this all together, because not only is the timing not ideal for people and only having one hearing where people can come out and talk about the operating budget. I think we made some improvements on the operating budget process this year, but it's not working. I would think we hear public comment and it's kind of like talking at us, and then we don't really get to have dialogue, and then we just respond, but it doesn't work. So I think we need major changes to the way that we handle creating real dialogue and understanding around the budget, and I'm hopeful we can do that next year. I would like to also see if we can schedule a time for another hearing on a weeknight or a weekend that makes more sense for other people. Now, I want to address a couple of things that I've heard these last few weeks, and frankly, the last few months. One is the call to reduce the police budget by 50%. So I've done some analysis that shows that in the last couple of years, roughly 19% of tasks that police do in terms of the time that they spend could conceivably be done by someone or something other than police officers. And these include parking and traffic violations, responding to homelessness, responding to drug overdoses, some mental health emergencies, just whole buckets of issues that we've heard again and again have been dumped onto the police over time. And I'm working on legislation that would get at the kind of traffic and parking aspect of this. But related to that, I think some have been talking about how the police budget increases this year. This year's budget actually reduces the police budget. It shifts 5% of the police operating budget over to the new Stop the Violence Fund, along with an additional $250,000 to help the new Office of Community Health and Safety in the mayor's office. And that office is going to send trained social workers out with officers to help respond to calls like the ones that I mentioned above that require more wraparound services. It's going to be called a co-responder model. It does not have a budget of 20,000 like some have said, but it's more like 5 million that's going to grow in future years. So that's one thing. I do agree that the police budget needs to be reduced, but just as we did not get to where we are in 1 year, I don't believe that reductions can or should happen overnight either. I mean, the truth is that reducing the police budget 50% can't happen without laying off police officers. In the case of other departments, those positions are elimination of already vacant positions to tie us over until hopefully the time that we get emergency funding from the federal government. I do not support laying off any person right now, and by extension, their family, during a time when jobs are scarce and most everyone's mental health is suffering. It's just not something I can vote for. This budget does not lay anyone off. And if you want to talk about police behavior and hiring and training, let's have that conversation, because I agree major changes are needed. But, and if you want more details, you can check out my paper on policing, which is on my District 8 website, and I'll have a second version coming out this Wednesday. So let's talk about all those things having to do with policing, but I don't think that laying off officers, some of whom are not the ones who are, say, problematic, as the public source article gets at today, really is going to solve the problem that we're talking about here. And then, furthermore, I think even if we would prefer for social workers to be responding to human service type emergencies, the fact of the matter is that the police are among those who are responding to the emergencies right now. And the Office of Community Health and Safety is not going to be able to take that place overnight. So I realize it's not bold enough for many of you, but I'm listening to the facts and I'm listening to my own heart. And to me, that's a responsible move. And then just to address the, I think that Reverend Burgess addressed this a little bit, the Act 265 in 1951. I guess it's a difference in interpretation, but yes, the money is, the city is hurting for money right now. But because the mayor was able to present to council a balanced budget, it means that we don't have a deficit on paper. So we don't actually have the proof on paper that is needed to justify in court firing police officers. Come July, and this is something that I have to give credit to Councilman Lavelle for explaining to me. Come July, if we don't get some assistance from the federal government, we won't have any choice but to lay off 600 plus city employees, and that's going to include some police officers. I hope it doesn't come to that, but that's what we're bracing for. And then, as was mentioned also by Reverend Burgess, there is a hiring freeze that's been placed on a new police recruiting class for 2021. And with the number of police officers up for retirement this year, we will see lose some police officers due to attrition. So we probably will. I don't know how many are going to retire. It could be 50, it could be 200, but we will see some people leave the force this year. I do agree that we need revenue to fund essential programs. And so I think we have a couple of options. One is let's fight together to get the state legislature to allow us to collect either property taxes and or payroll preparation taxes from our city's largest nonprofits like UPMC. Let's launch a campaign with city council and all of you who spoke today, and let's make it happen, because I agree that needs to happen. Another way that we can get some money right now is to borrow money. Through bonds, we can borrow money for certain infrastructure projects, including affordable housing. So we have a $10 million that's generated each year through for the Housing Opportunity Fund that the URA works with to fund affordable housing through real estate transfer taxes. But by borrowing money and having a sound plan to pay it back, we could be putting 20, 30, 40, $50 million into affordable housing projects and really be doing something bold there. So I'm in support of that, as I think some of my colleagues are as well. And soon we will be voting on legislation to fund the Avenues of Hope program, also run by the URA, to fund commercial business districts in historically Black neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. I also support that. And then lastly, we can enact the parks tax that voters also approved on the ballot last year. To me, this is an equity issue in a way that we can improve the quality of life for Pittsburghers living in historically disinvested communities. So I realized that was a lot, but I really wanted to get at a lot of the things I've been hearing over the last few weeks and clarify some things, clarify my position. I appreciate you all indulging me on that.
Thank you very much. Any further members? Seeing none, Councilwoman Strasburger, you actually echoed, I think, everything I was going to touch upon, so I don't feel the need to now do that. The only other thing that I will add is when a lot of the speakers talked about all the cuts that we're making to all the other departments, what they should hopefully understand and realize is we're not necessarily actually going in and saying, okay, EMS, you have a budget of 1 million. We're now going to cut that 1 million by 10%. What we are going on and saying is, okay, you currently have all these unfilled positions, or you currently have dollars that you're not utilizing. Therefore, you will not be able to fill those positions this year and or not able to utilize those dollars this year. Therefore, that's now shown on our books as a reduction. And so when they may have had 30,000 sitting aside to bring on a new EMT, they now are not able to do so. And so that's how we're able to essentially balance this budget. I think it was Brandy Fisher who sort of said, I believe she said, decent people do decent things. That's the best way to summarize this budget. It is a decent budget that does a decent thing by cutting our services to the bare bones so that we can literally not lay off any worker for the city during a pandemic. Now, if we do not get federal support, if we do not get dollars from the federal government, in a few months, we may have to begin looking at doing undecent things and laying off individuals. But right now, this budget is one that's constructed in a way to get us 6 months down the line, where hopefully we can reopen the budget. We can reimagine what we do with our police force. we can begin putting services back in place, and hopefully we can avoid laying off individuals. But I just wanted to clarify, when they see cuts, it's not that we're actually taking away, we're not fulfilling what wasn't already there. With that, we need a motion we're going to recess this until our final line item vote, which will then end our budget process. So need a motion to recess.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 We are in recess. I'll see you all back here soon. Thank you all.